Welcome back to some GSL cast, guys. We got Group C played out this morning, actually, so I'm officially caught up again, mostly thanks to the fact that GSL is now played once a week as opposed to twice a week, but still. And just a reminder, if you do want to support the GSL, the Korean scene, or just get your hands on these replays, patreon.com/GSL is where you can do so alongside some background interviews and so on and so forth. But we got ourselves Group C, which consists of GuMiHo, Nightmare, Byun, and Creator. And to start things off, it is top left GuMiHo, bottom right Nightmare. Now, it feels like it's been a long time since we've seen these two guys actually match up against each other, because I constantly reference where Nightmare even made his, in my opinion, true debut, which was against GuMiHo on Cactus Valley. Like, that just sticks out in my brain, so I've been able to reference it every time I see Nightmare. And then I don't actually recall it ever being in a case where he's facing GuMiHo. So, I don't know what that's about. As apparently they have played previous to this match. In fact, many times. I just happen to miss all of it, I guess. In Asia Open Cup, in Masters Coliseum, in the, I forget, TV show matches. They play tons. And GuMiHo does have a more recent winning record, but it actually goes back and forth a little bit. So yeah, I just happen to avoid all of them. But in case you didn't know, yeah, that's Nightmare back in 2015 or something. Bringing out a DT Blink build before people even realized DT Blink was good in the late game. I mean, he did a really, well, I guess that had to be 2016, because obviously that's Legacy of the Void. But regardless, long time ago. But he did it before anyone actually gave any credit whatsoever to DT Blink. And since then, he's kind of kept the infamy that is, you know, being a little bit of a cheeser. You can go DT Blink on 2 base, try and all-in some guy. You're going to be called a cheeser, and you are Protoss, so what do you expect, right? And he's been, you know, aggressive. But I really think that Nightmare has at least tried to move out of just being, let's say, like, I'm not even going to say Haas, you know, because Haas is actually like cheese greed, in fact. He will go 4 Nexus before you know it, and you'll be like, well, this doesn't make any sense. No, Nightmare has moved away from being like a... I had it on the tip of my tongue, man. Some really old school Protoss player who is only known for cheesing. I don't know, like Inca. Man, that's really old school, but that's one, I guess, that I can think of. Arthur. Damn, I'm good. All right, no one's gonna remember. Poor old Slayer's Arthur. The most memorable thing about him, actually, besides that he was on Slayers, I guess, which is a very big team as far as fan favorite goes, but he said he had terrible posture. But he was also a big cheeser. Like, he always cheesed, and it was always off of 1 or 2 bases, basically. Again, Haas has actually done macro cheese, like I said. But anyways, not to dig too deep into StarCraft history. Nightmare, yes, he does some aggressive builds. Yes, he does cheese. Yes, he does all-in, but he's actually been playing some macro games. I would say what still sets him apart from other Protosses, though, is his insistence on, like, gateway builds sometimes. Although I really have not seen him lately, and we do see that there is a robo down, so it's not going to be a gateway-based focus at all. In fact, it could be one of the most basic builds you can do as far as the safety concerns, which is going to be 2-base Colossus. Now, this is not a very common build, although it is a thing, because 2-base Colossus might make you feel nice and safe on 2 bases, but extending your reach over to a 3rd or providing any pressure over to the Terran opponent is kind of difficult to do. And there is still a momentary, moment of still being unsafe when you aren't on the Colossus, yet you have so many resources invested into it. That's where a wall comes in, a couple of units, and of course scouting, which Nightmare's been pretty good about. Looks like he finally lost that Adept. The Observer is going to come in pretty freaking well timed, though. Maybe could have gone through the middle to make sure those Marines didn't do some weird push out, because there are actually a lot more Marines. What Nightmare was unable to scout was that this actually was a 3 racks opener from GuMiHo, so actually at this point kind of an old build too. Not nearly as, well, I don't know if rare is the right word, but you just don't see 3 racks that often anymore. But GuMiHo is absolutely the type to do it, right? Because I've been talking about Nightmare being a bit of a cheesy guy, all-in-y guy, a bit of a weird guy, and obviously GuMiHo can do all of those things as well. We just know that he can bring out some really long macro games, especially as a mech player in some other matchups. Yeah, good old-fashioned 3 racks. The Observer hopefully did see the Marines that joined up, right? And the 3 racks actually should just be beaten by the 2 base Colossus build. So this is either Nightmare really familiar with GuMiHo or getting a little bit lucky. Because this Colossus obviously does very, very well against Marines. And you can add a couple of sentries here. And actually, you could have maybe in a perfect, absolutely perfect world, cut those Marines in half with a force field. That would have been the best case scenario. I'm not sure. My cats chase each other. I'm not sure that you could take on all the Marines. It's a little dangerous, I suppose, but definitely could have cut it in half. Let's say Libby. The point is, Nightmare's 2-base build protects himself against an early sim push from the 3 racks player. But then here's where the problems start to occur sometimes for a Colossus player if they were playing into a 3rd base anyway, which Nightmare apparently isn't, is that they don't have a lot of drop defense or multitasking defense. And so they will even have trouble getting out onto their 3rd just because a concave will be available, especially when you are growing your Marauder count fairly fast as a 3 racks. But this is actually very good for GuMiHo. Manages to escape with half of his, or more than half his Marines, scout the proxy gateway, and thus not just cancel it, but then also reveal Nightmare's intentions. So we actually have GuMiHo, I don't believe, I'm gonna guess, did not mean to actually make a tank initially, but as he saw what was going on, did make a tank. Because you would usually use that to swap on over and just dedicate purely and entirely to bioproduction. Oh, that's a lot of Marauders to lose, and the pickup just frankly failed. That looked like he, changed his mind, but there really wouldn't be a reason. You would know that Blink is not done in a build like this. So I think he just failed picking up those Marauders. Medevac decided it did not do anything. This is where the tank really is important, because, I mean, not only did you just lose Marauders, which really are the best thing you have against the Colossus right now, but you also are incapable of getting a really good situation going on as far as the fight, because you are coming down your own choke. And this is the temporary, I would say, power spike of the Colossus player, especially when they consider pushing before expanding. There are 7 gateways, even though that proxy gate was canceled. Nightmare's build to let into it. Funny thing about this game, however, is that GuMiHo actually went for a 3rd CC on location, something that Nightmare hasn't even checked. So somehow he still has that kind of running, I suppose. Marine Scouts, that is their Nexus, was put down. It is actually just a little feeler, though. 16 Marines being unloaded. Very dangerous call there from GuMiHo, but ultimately a good one. The tank, bunker, SCV pool, and threats of more units reinforcing made it so that he felt safe enough at home to go for a double drop. And like I've been discussing previously, this does have a weakness against drops. Now, the army has been recalled home, and there's clearly enough army to spread around against what is now something like 10 Marines, but, you know, it still pulled the army back. It gives GuMiHo breathing room, and really the best thing about this is that Nightmare had no idea that 3rd CC is there. I mean, it still would have been just a little hop over and then bring it back. Not the worst thing in the world, but I really can't express. I can only try and tap into any, Terrans who actually have done this before. The feeling of your economy when your 3rd CC is down in location, you don't have to move it or plant it or wait for it, whatever. It's so much easier. It is so much easier. It's so much nicer feeling. Medevacs did escape, as you can see here, joining up with the crew. The tanks were absolutely an important stopgap for those Colossus. You saw that he got a couple of Vikings just to try and take advantage of the space in that particular engagement. You know, the Colossus would not be comfortable going up the ramp there, and then the tanks were covering to a certain degree, and the Vikings do have range on their side. But you don't necessarily want to go directly into Vikings if you only have 2 medevacs, which is really the problem. And an even bigger problem when you 3-racks. Your starport is later. So, yeah, 4 Vikings, great. But now that Blink is done, that's certainly not enough to deal with a Colossus player. After these next 2 medevacs, you might go ahead and add on at least 4 more Vikings, as there are... Oh, I thought there was 3 Colossus. No, there are only 2. Still, the Vikings obviously want to be able to shoot freely at a Colossus, yes, but really what they want to do is be able to shoot down a Colossus before the engagement really happens. So that's why you would still see probably 8 as a really baseline number of Vikings. If they have 1 Colossus, that's probably low enough. You would just look for a concave. And these tanks will be helpful as the game goes on, as long as they are positioned correctly. They will help, particularly against the Disruptors, which obviously don't have such an answer like the Viking as the Colossus does. Nightmare is on 4 bases now, just about. I'm trying to use his Blink Stalkers, but I think we just lost a handful. Most of those Marauders that went down was from the Colossus on the earlier attack. And GuMiHo scouting around forward. Seems to be run-bys. I assume this is an anti-run-by. Or maybe even Observer Catcher. But I think he actually did kill the Observer. Yeah, he's killed 2 so far. And we got ourselves kind of a late game, actually. GuMiHo, I mean, he's not really the most action-packed TvP player. In fact, as far as my gut feeling about GuMiHo is that actually TvP is his worst. He can pop off on TvZ, and his TvT is always good. Maybe not the greatest, but it's always good. But his TvP can really feel uncomfortable. It really feels like he's not, like, confident in the matchup. Here we see totally appropriate decisions made and changes made to what Nightmare has done, so I'm not ragging on this particular game, just overall. But, you know, this particular game, we even see GuMiHo does push out. He got maxed out. He moves across the map, most importantly, without being scouted. Like, this is the real reason Nightmare is totally and utterly screwed. Losing that 3rd Nexus, losing the probes as well, and now going up against the tanks, actually siege 4 of them, by the way, not just 3. I mean, he does have a decent army if the charge lots can get on top of the tanks, and if the focus fire isn't there, and the disruptors obviously corral the bio. I mean, it can work out for Nightmare, but not only did he lose that Nexus already, he also is supply blocked. So this is supposed to be the time in which he is getting maxed out and is deciding how to pull the trigger, and now it's just so much more awkward. We also have the tanks kind of covering the Vikings. If the Stalkers blink forward, the tanks are a bit better at dealing with that. Now a 4-position bio army as well. And Nightmare is just in so much trouble. Now losing technology and production in the natural, which he can't defend because these tanks are absolutely brutal. He needs to come in from an opposite side, and there he goes now. But the tanks, okay, they are going to be jumped upon. They do get the target fire off. One more shot would have done wonders against the Disruptor count. Not going to happen, but maybe not necessary either. The Disruptors, did they even do anything? All the rest of the Protoss army gets absolutely decimated, and GuMiHo wins this engagement. Absolutely no problem. Still 70 supply above, a lot of it just rattling back at home. And while Nightmare does have a 4th done, because he was actually fairly quick to his 5th, he still is in a lot of trouble. He lost the majority of his robo units, honestly the majority of his army, just in general. But the expensive slow building units, he's been down in upgrades the entire time, so obviously that's going to stay the same. Only 2 upgrades to the 4 of GuMiHo. And has other problems on the horizon, such as GuMiHo's transition over into Liberators and the addition of Ghost. I mean, the Terran army gets better and better, whereas Nightmare's army, it doesn't necessarily get that much better, but, you know, generally in a more even game, you would have Nightmare deflect that of somehow, some way, and then try and take the map control with his army. So that's, you know, a good way to use your disruptors if you have map control and you're bullying the Terran. If you're making disruptors defensively, that gives the Terran a lot more options, especially when they're up 60 supply. This disruptor is actually pretty good. 3 goes for it. Just still not enough. GuMiHo have to make quite the hiccup here to actually lose this game, and I see no more disruptors ready to shoot, so it's literally the only thing that can actually cause a problem. This disruptor was ready to shoot, but isn't being controlled as Nightmare is distracted. There's a pretty good shot once more, and Charlotte's coming in on a weakened Terran force. That is not the killing blow that GuMiHo was anticipating. That's is unfortunate, but he still holds on to 50 supply lead, so he's still okay. I guess, I was going to say, in a twist of fate there, the 5th base has only just been discovered. I was going to say, maybe much like GuMiHo's 3rd base got went undiscovered for so long. Maybe Nightmare's 4th could, but no, that SCV just scouted that, so simple medevac drop over there of 8 Marines could slaughter the probes and then also cause a distraction. It's a weak point. It is a weak point. Nightmare is determined not to give up. He's even going to finish another upgrade. But GuMiHo is finishing his +3 attack and moving on to Liberators, which next time he gets on the front lines, which he is absolutely still the one that is capable of doing that with his supply. It's going to be with Liberators also drawing a line that Nightmare will not be able to break out of. Surprisingly enough, despite the desperate scenario, we did have Nightmare. Maybe he was already building a Stargate. Maybe that was it. He did actually have a Stargate, so there were some plans to mine a transition. And I was talking about how the Protoss army doesn't necessarily get better. I mean, it gets more upgrades, it gets maxed out, it gets more production and more money, bank, kind of like a Zerg situation as it takes map control and looks to get the disruptor shots, right? But then when Liberators come out, you're kind of, it's a game of like making sure the Liberators never get across the map. You either play that game with mobility, or you try and add what is maybe a stronger composition, which are the Stargate units. It's just so damn difficult. They're so expensive and slow building to get to before the carriers actually are really impactful versus a maxed out Terran player. And then we see a lot of Protoss not decide to go for it. And then we see at least one Protoss who is determined to go for it even faster than you would expect, and that is Classic, who played in the previous group. But I think the one game he did end up getting a Stargates, he like plural Stargates, he died. But he's been really trying to do that multiple times. Anyway, different scenario. Classic's kind of trying doing it off of 3 bases. If Nightmare did it, it would just be as a necessary response to the Liberators, as again, he's been in no shape to get map control. But you know what Nightmare has done? Kept 4 bases alive. This Liberator craftsman only just now starting. And he's also been able to recover this game, kind of. It is kind of, because GuMiHo still has the larger army, the superior upgrades, and that Liberator technology that with Librange, you can see, can also perpetually harass a base. And that's, well, I guess another reason to have a Stargate, just 1 Void Ray, 1 Phoenix to help out against that. This Terran army actually feeling confident enough just to take the engagement against the Colossus with the upgrades the way they are. They were right about that. The Colossus not quite able to burn through the Marauders. Now the rest of the Terran force actually jumping on top of everything else. Recall is used, but into the awaiting arms of 3-3 Terran. All of the disruptors get bopped before the shots actually go off. And it's just so difficult to actually kill an army like this. Not only are the upgrades so superior for the Terran, but still an okay number of medevacs. And then no Immortals. You know, if the disruptors don't actually get the shots, the disruptors don't actually hit, like that happened, then the Immortals are usually at least consistent. We have seen some Protoss experiment with adding in 2, 4, 6, 8 Immortals, whatever it is, but yeah, without that, those Colossus had like 20 beams, probably, and the Marauders just would not die. Yeah, GG GuMiHo able to close it out in a game that he won based off that 1 push anyway, but important that he closes it out. So Terran wins first game. It is a best of 3, so let's get into game 2. Game 2 is going to be an Oceanborn. Bottom left, GuMiHo. That's top left. And bottom right, Nightmare. So Nightmare actually had a pretty good build order as far as just purely defending and staying safe and alive against the 3 racks. And then as far as its counterattack opportunity, the 2-base attack he was going for, it also, you know, had its benefits against the 3 racks as well. Because again, 1, you don't really get easy access to starport units. Not that any build would have that many medevacs at that point anyway, but still. And then 2, you generally are not adding on tanks. You're using that factory to hop. And then if you do use the factory, it is into Widow Mines a lot of the time, if you even use it. But it's usually just not in any tank production. It does kind of depend on what the Terran wants to do in the game, I suppose, and GuMiHo actually seems a little more tank happy than other Terrans. He does more of those like 2-base tank pushes. He does more of a turtley style of play after a kind of routine 2-base drop. So there is that for GuMiHo, but then obviously he just was responding very importantly to the conundrum that was ahead. And perhaps Nightmare's transition into his own 3rd Nexus after his plans were kind of foiled would have still gotten him kind of lead, I suppose. Like, it would have gotten him into a good position, maybe. But then GuMiHo's 3rd CC had actually just turned into an orbital on location and was able to saturate as soon as Nightmare left. And that is just such a bummer. Like, at least stopping that from just sitting there, getting that lift off and the lift back would have been a 20-30 second delay on the saturation. Of course, better case scenario for Nightmare is that he actually checks it immediately and just stops it from building. Because if you're going to do a 2-base attack and the 3rd CC is building on location, kind of hope that you'd be in a position to stop it. But now that it happens, so GuMiHo is actually in a fine position. His double medevac drop was, again, pretty routine as far as a response, as long as he felt protected at home. And then Nightmare just got completely out of position. I'm actually quite shocked at it, thinking back on it. GuMiHo killed the scouts very reliably, and Adept and 2 observers went down. But then Nightmare was replacing the spotters on the map. He just was at the exact too late time, too pixels off to the right, whatever it was, to not see that push. So it's a very unfortunate game for Nightmare overall, actually. Besides that severe outpositioning, I really think that game could have been much more of a tug of war. GuMiHo would have been on superior upgrades, he might have been moving on to Liberators, and Nightmare would have actually been able to play the mobility game against it. He just lost such an important position. I got GuMiHo with 2 Reapers start things off here. Cyclone follow up as well, and a 1-1-1 in general, so a very different opener. This is something that Nightmare was able to see as, I guess, the probe, you know, before it died. Little sketch, though. Nightmare doesn't know what exactly is following up the factory expand. Did it swap over to the reactor? Who knows? The Adept didn't get across the map. Is it going into a 2-base committal? Who knows? The Observer isn't here this game because it was a Twilight Council opener. Is it a 3rd CC? Well, if an Adept Shade finished on the high ground, sacrificed itself for the greater good, it'd actually probably be able to see that it was. But there is just nothing scouting here. So that's pretty dangerous news. Now, Nightmare might just be going for a 4-gate. He's almost 300 minerals, so I think he is. And in that case, well, maybe it's alright. Now, the 3CC can still defend against a 4-gate, actually. Oh. Just a 3-gate. And then a shield battery came down as well. Alright, so a 3-gate then is very much not committed. And it actually might be defensively minded initially, just because Nightmare, again, has no idea what GuMiHo is doing, and was playing a defensive style last game as well. The 3-gate gives you the option of choosing either to defend, macro, or attack, but if you just build stalkers at home, for instance, thinking for sure he's going to attack me and you don't do anything with them, well, that's pretty bad. So the best case scenario I would say right now is for Nightmare to expand. Regardless of that 3rd gateway addition, just expand. Because a 3-gate attack won't work, especially because he didn't even build a Wool Prism, so it would be really very late and not very helpful. And obviously, just defending would also not be helpful because GuMiHo is 100% not attacking. So the expansion does come down. It is a little unfortunate it wasn't just straight up a 2-gate expand, though. And GuMiHo is, well, setting up his proper defenses and getting a wee bit supply blocked. Just a little bit. Observer is finally going to be able to see exactly what this is. Now, Double Raven is in position, so the Observer needs to be very, very careful. Seems actually pretty aware an Observer. A Raven could be out. This is Triple Raven, excuse me. This has actually, I think, delayed the double barracks production a little bit, though, so this is even further delayed bio. But, of course, if GuMiHo's plan is to not move out until he's maxed out in 3 bases with 2-2 anyway, not going to get 2-2 unless they go engineering bay. Supply blocked as well. Nightmare taking the opportunities when he can get it. Still isn't actually aware of it being a 3rd CC. He hasn't seen the full extent of the army to know that it's still kind of army light. You know, there could be 10 Marauders over there for all he knows. That's kind of interesting, but you know, this position and knowledge of your opponent, which Nightmare does have, I feel like screams 3CC, more mid-game oriented GuMiHo. If that, maybe he just actually waits to the very, very late game. Nice save on the Observer, nice pick off with the Stalkers. Nightmare continuing to get what he can get. And then his technology is actually Charge and into, presumably, Storm in a hot second. He built a couple of High Templars for the feedback, as he did spot the Ravens with the probe. However, the auto turret still came down, so that's not ideal. There is Storm. There's Storm. So Charge Storm. I mean, it's gonna be fine as far as the game goes, but this feels very. This still feels very bad for Nightmare, actually. With GuMiHo continuing to build tanks, continuing to play defensive, actually getting a proper engagement with Charged Storm seems unlikely. Usually this is a best case scenario for the Protoss players, finding the Terran moving out and completely oblivious. Which could still happen, because GuMiHo doesn't actually know. Oh no, he saw it, never mind. Oh, of course he saw the High Templars feedback his units. Yeah, okay, so he's probably aware that it is Charged Storm. All right, yeah, so there's no chance for Nightmare to actually get to the opportunity. So if Nightmare's not going to get the opportunity to 3-base charge Storm a guy, then he really needs to move on. He needs to go into a 4th Nexus, which thankfully he is doing, but then also get to upgrades, which that's what I was really quite worried about. Upgrades having been pushed away to do what was supposed to be, feels like more of a timing. Now it's really nothing. Maybe a little distraction as a Warp Prism comes in for a Storm drop. Where is it? I don't know, it's coming along. Just finished building. GuMiHo is really going quite serious on the turtle mode. Does make a mistake chasing down the stalkers, however, and lose a handful of marauders. But 5 tanks, a bunker. We got auto turrets that could be slapped down. That actually still be very helpful. Interference matrix on the Warp Prism. A couple of Vikings as well for that Warp Prism. GuMiHo absolutely in the know. But look how little bio is covering these tanks. I mean, it's not a lot of charge lots, but I feel like if Nightmare had actually built up as many charges as he could, he didn't go for a 4th base, he didn't go for the upgrades, he didn't go for the Colossus. I mean, the charge lots might have overwhelmed this. It might still. I thought GuMiHo would be way more timid than that. And now he's out on the map. His tanks do siege up, but oh my goodness. Still a far cry from the defensive position that they were in. Nightmare gets a little opportunity. Doesn't end up winning, obviously, off of it, but that was a trade. 5 tanks alive, but still not a lot of bio covering it. That is my main concern. The charge lot numbers of Nightmare are going to grow as he realizes how tank-based it still is. He has 8 gateways, so another 8 zealots could be coming in soon. They'll make a total of 16. I'm pretty sure if they get any type of concave, they will take down this army. Once again, Nightmare is out upgraded. And it looks like he's actually not going to really take on the army so much. Catch the reinforcements, gets a tank, will find a couple of bio units, but not going to go for a base trade, obviously. They're going to come home. It's still a fine scenario, I think, as far as taking on the engagement, though. It's awkward, because that Nexus is under fire, but only by 1 tank so far. So Nightmare is using that to go ahead and get the time to finish his +1 weapons and his extended thermal lance. The Raven did not get the interference matrix on the Warp Prism, and as such, the storms do all come down. The storms, a cherry on top, though, in my opinion. It was really just the charge lot numbers that were going to take down such a composition from GuMiHo. And many of them are still alive. Both Colossus still alive. Archon at least saved a couple of the High Templars, and Nightmare can get back on the offensive. Now, I'm not sure he can break GuMiHo, who now has defender's advantage on his side, high ground, as well as Little Sim City, particularly against those charge lots. But it does give Nightmare a lot of control over the game. 4 bases to 3, more ideal scenario certainly than last game. Starting to get to his +2 at the very least as well, as GuMiHo was a little late to his armor. And a Stargate once again gets added on. We'll see if he actually is planning a more full-on transition over into the late game, or if he just likes to add this in case of Liberator harassment. That's the only thing that ended up being used for last game, which is actually still useful. Those Liberators were a pain, but not usually something you would see this fast. We're nowhere close to having Lib range after all. Nightmare does need to be careful. Absolutely. GuMiHo, after all, was 3C. Oh, Jesus, that's a good storm. 3cc power-up. So initially it was a lot of tank-based defense, and that's what I was talking about the charge lots, but in the blink of an eye, with all of the barracks actually pumping out units, you know, the actual bio army has grown considerably. The charge lots will melt without an armor upgrade. The High Templars will be EMP'd now that the ghosts have been added on, and so absolutely Nightmare isn't in a perfect position, but at least he can be out on the map. Again, his choices are to continue being out on the map and trading and denying bases as much as possible, although already failing and denying the 4th base, or he can go into the Stargates, and that actually was his plan. He wants to play out the Sky Toss game and against the late game Terran. Now, a lot of the reason why you would not see this is because the game is very action-packed. There's a lot more going on. Even if the Terran takes a little bit of a breather, you still have to be very concerned about when they actually want to push, especially, again, off of 3cc economy, and now 4cc's done. GuMiHo could wait for +2 ship weapons, lib range, and 8 liberators, and then Nightmare has all the time in the world to get to his own 9 carriers and whatever else he wants, right? But a lot of other times, Terran player will push when maxed, even without the Liberators, thinking that they can still take a good engagement. And the supply and resources caught up in 3 carriers, obviously not helping on the front line, also might not help you once they're out. They don't have all the interceptors once they're out. They don't quite have their +1 upgrade. And frankly, Marines with +3 attack, which is what GuMiHo is working on, just tear them up to pieces anyway. But GuMiHo is not pushing out. So Nightmare, very much reading this correctly, is going to have plenty of time, like I said, to build up the Sky Toss counts, but then also to get an ideal engagement. He does still have this High Templars. A lot of the Protosses might go away with High Templars. You know, just the EMPs will hit them, right? Despite how many times the EMP has been nerfed in the last couple of years, chances are you'll hit the ball of High Templar that's love to hang around each other. But we do also have some High Templars placed defensively, which I always like to see. Good find. Tank and medevac going down, but this is also a potential trap. GuMiHo has a split, has a concave. Nightmare was at least wary of that. A couple of units think we're going to pass the army and got 9 SCV kills. Not too shabby at all. Disruptors being dotted around the maps. High Templars being dotted around the maps. The downside to this is that you might not control them fast enough to kill them before they kill you. So that's always a concern. But Nightmare is pretty confident in his placement. Just literally everything is spread out. We're going to be up to 6 carriers very soon with +2 started lickety split for those interceptors. 2 forges as well, finally catching up on some of those upgrades. A real late game TvP, most likely to be seen from GuMiHo in my opinion. For Nightmare, I'm actually a little surprised, but GuMiHo's basically played a way in which Nightmare has never had a true opportunity to attack. Nightmare did have a 2-base attack in mind last game, was denied it. He did have a 3-base attack in mind for this game, and was denied it, so definitely not a Nightmare to get this long of a game, but it is on him to react appropriately and prepare for a late game scenario. See if he's actually the better one at it. And the lull continues. I believe GuMiHo scanned the army of Nightmare a couple of times. It has yet to see the carriers, actually. I don't know if GuMiHo's ever scanned the main. Nope. I kind of assume, though, like with how passive Nightmare has been in particular, that GuMiHo would predict carriers. You know, if you're playing the other style of late game PvT, you would have sacrificed half a dozen armies at this point. Trying to break the poor guy. And 9 Vikings is a good start, but it's, I don't know. Maybe isn't the perfect Terran force against what Nightmare has built up. It does have that +3 attack done, and again, those Marines will slaughter all the interceptors, provided they aren't stormed, so that's the dance we're witnessing right now. The Ghost rushing forward, the rest of the Protoss army pushing forward to respond to that. The High Templar is kept safely behind. A Raven still in play, does go for a double anti-armor missile, actually, guaranteeing that almost everything is splashed red. It's certainly helpful, but as we can see, Nightmare not even taking an engagement, so he's going to be able to let that wear off, or maybe he will. Actually, a very bold move right now, but the Bio Army, uncertain about their victory, do end up backing away. Disruptor is hitting every which way. We're trying to find out where they're going to get the strikes. I think they got mostly strikes, to be honest. GuMiHo just was not at all prepared for the actual move-in, and his army is just dead. It's just gone. Nightmare choosing an appropriate moment, not necessarily because of his composition, in my opinion, but because GuMiHo was clearly just not prepared with his army setup. GuMiHo was still in a clump with very little room to maneuver and concave, was late to even trying to concave, and clearly wasn't ready to micro his bio against the disruptors, to either focus fire them, which I believe is actually very, very doable, or to avoid the disruptor shots themselves. Like, I 100% chalk that up to a problem that we don't, I think, often talk about when it comes to pro gamers, but obviously it can happen to them as well. It was a situation in which they knew an attack could happen, they knew the potential of their army versus the potential of the opposition, and then they just weren't ready to actually micro the army, basically. It's not the individual Marauder pickup micro you might be thinking of, but it is microing your army. And I mean, it's game over at this point. There's no amount of reinforcements coming out quickly enough from a Terran player to stop this severe supply gap. Although I guess the supply gap has a lot to do with a bunch of stalkers being warped in, which don't do particularly well against Bio with superior upgrades. So this is why GuMiHo looks like he's fighting back, but at the end of the day, it was just too dramatic of a army loss in planetary defense. Nightmare has so many bases back at home as well. He's really not that far under upgrade, only missing one. A couple of Archons might come in here as he sees the lack of ghosts. GuMiHo actually still has plenty of mining, despite losing that planetary, and good lord, that's a lot of mules over in that orbital, holy shit. But even still, even if he had done that maybe a little bit quicker, and so he had 800, 1,000 minerals in the bank, Terran production is Terran production, it's not Zerg production. You know, it's not Protoss production, it's going to come out of these barracks that are now being camped. It's going to be coming out one at a time, in no secret location. And so it is going to be torn down, despite GuMiHo's attempts to micro his heart out there. Here we go, GG. Yeah, that was one of the more awkward fights you'll see. I'm guessing GuMiHo just really didn't think he'd move in. You know, he had the Liberators sieging up, he really had a powerful bio army, he had the superior upgrades, anti-armor missile was still affecting, he got a couple of EMPs as well. At least one. But Nightmare was correct to push in right there. That was such an awkward fight for GuMiHo. In the bottom left of Solaris, it is Nightmare. In the top right, we have GuMiHo. So Nightmare finding the opportunity to take advantage of GuMiHo's positioning, basically. He was clearly not ready to fight. I mean, a Terran player who is ready to engage will have a preset concave of their bio. They'll try and get all of their EMPs off first, whereas GuMiHo actually got one EMP off, and then I think he started to just bunch up his units. The Vikings would usually be trying to tag whatever air unit or Colossus before the fight began, and it just would look like they were ready, either to defend or to pounce on you. And certainly, that was a Terran player who was not ready to go. You see a big ball of bio like that against, well, the army that Nightmare had, right? Colossus, Disruptors, Storms. And you're like, well, that's what I do. That's what I do in whatever league I play. I didn't think it's what they do. But I just gotta imagine GuMiHo was kind of shocked to see that army move in. It's like, yeah, my army's bunched up, but like, come on, look at everything else I have. What the hell? A Nightmare makes a good decision, played that game out very, very well, past to the point of his original plan, which was to go for that 3-base, heavy committed charge lot storm attack. You delay your upgrades, you delay your kind of everlasting technology, the robo, the storm kind of wears off after EMPs come down, and you do delay your 4th base usually as well. I don't think his 4th base is actually all that delayed just because he adapted, but yeah, you can do, you know, obviously a very different approach to that rather than just focus primarily on building 8 gateways, charge, and storm. So theoretically, GuMiHo was getting the game that he apparently desired. 3CC is one thing, but then he also played that super defensively. Missile turrets coming down, tanks is the emphasis, triple Raven. Don't forget that. 2 of them ended up dying and not really doing whatever they wanted to do, but yeah, triple Raven. And then into all those extra command centers, so... You might see Hero Marine, I think, is a good example of someone who might do a 3CC build, but then they're 100% focusing on trying to get a very fast, almost maxed out 2-2 attack. So you would be incorrect to assume they'd go in, like, you know, 15, 20 minutes, no problem. GuMiHo did push out at the very least, a little bit. I mean, maybe not the best, though. He kind of dipped his toes into the water, and Nightmare slapped him back. So anyway, now we're on a map that might not encourage GuMiHo to play such a way. That last map, we did have high ground 3CC. Whereas this one, yeah, it's technically high ground 3CC, but not nearly in the same way that the last map is. It's a long distance over to what could be a high ground 3rd CC as far as getting your triangle. It can be used defensively, especially if you are a tank player. Tanks can use these chokes wonderfully. If you aren't a tank player, we actually saw what can happen in the opposite direction with Bunny versus Classic. Bunny was in such an awkward place trying to force his bio through chokes against Colossus. GuMiHo does seem to be more of a mech player. Well, yeah, mech player, yes, but tank player than others. I guess they go hand in hand. Twilight Council once again from Nightmare. Just gonna say to hell with that stupid Stargate thing. Or Robo thing, that's what he is, Robo thing. And perhaps another 3 gates, because I think he is mindful of GuMiHo's 2-base potential. And then it's about reading whether or not that is being done and actually building the units off of 3 gateways or not. GuMiHo not doing anything, I was going to say particularly scary. Alright, this is 2-1, so it's not that weird, but it's obviously not 1-1-1. We don't have a third rack, so it's not going to be that 2-base committed tank push. But it is, once again, tanks. Seems to really be GuMiHo's jam. And Nightmare is going into 3 gateways once more. If he does add on a 4th, which does not seem like it, I mean, he's doing actually the exact same build down to the shield battery timing. GuMiHo would have a pretty good build against it. Tanks alone already make you much more protected against a 4-gate. And most Protoss players don't 4-gate as well as MaxPax does. That's just a fact. Then they also have a decent amount of bio and no Raven that only helps that one time it throws an auto turret down and then nothing else afterward. It also, of course, means that lack of starport means no Widowmine drop, no scouting, no harassment on Nightmare's side of the map. Nightmare is constantly preparing for such things, and then nothing ever happens to him, which is kind of a bummer. I mean, he is responding to the absence of stuff and whatever he is scouting. Again, not over-defending with suddenly having 10 stalkers, then his 3rd Nexus. That would be over-defending. That would be very useless. But it is kind of concerning. You know, it feels like Nightmare is maybe responding to GuMiHo more than GuMiHo feels the need to respond to Nightmare as far as just their mental going into the series. Now, we do have an SCV pull. I mean, you can do it, obviously. You can obviously change anything into anything, I suppose. But this is going to be 1 medevac. No combat shields, and certainly not a 2-base all-in. It is kind of scratching the surface of an all-in. It's a more dedicated push, but it is getting through the middle of the map without any opposition, and that's the worst news possible, actually. And this is kind of going back to what I was talking about, where it feels like Nightmare is responding to the potential of GuMiHo so much that he doesn't get on the map like maybe a more confident Stalker player would. So what he did instead was that he defended against any type of Banshee harassment, with the shield battery, you know, or Hellion drop as well. He was putting his Stalkers defensively again against potential drops, Liberators, or Ravens, and he was expanding, and he had 0 scouting on the 2-base attack, the units coming out. This Observer, disturbingly late. And then his Stalkers were in no position to even start picking this off. Even this attempt to break it is not going to work out. The SCVs repair that 2nd tank. It's going to get healthy again, and Nightmare, well, gets bopped in game number 3. GuMiHo might have picked up on how the last game looked as far as the positioning of Nightmare's units and been like, you know what's going to be really good against that? Because you really need either something to scout that this is at least on the way, and ideally, you need your Stalkers to be like, oh shit, that's on the way, and then start picking things off and buying time. And then he might have been able to play this out perfectly with his gateways finishing, his charge finishing. If the Stalkers had bought 20 extra seconds, if the force field on the ramp had bought an extra 10 seconds, he might have had enough. But yeah, bit of a disappointing end finale there. But GuMiHo will advance to the winners match, and Nightmare will face the loser of the next series. And the next series is here. Bottom left, it is Byun. Top right of Hecate, it is Creator. So we just witnessed a TvP between GuMiHo and Nightmare. We are now getting into really an entirely different TvP. Well, maybe not entirely different, but I would still say a different TvP. You're not talking about the most 1-base Terran versus the most 5-base Protoss, because that would maybe be the complete opposite of the last game, of the last series. But you are still talking, I think, about a more, I'm going to say typical Terran versus Protoss player in Byun. He does still do his kind of interesting openers, but I think the pace that he sets, the rhythm, the tempo that he sets, the whatever you want to call it, it is different than GuMiHo, who does seem to, well, display exactly the type of TvP he displayed, which is like a 2-base tank push, okay, throw that in there. 3cc Super Turtle, throw that in there. And then in a more typical, let's say, like 1-racks expand into 1-1-1 and then 3-1-1. Let's do a drop. Let's push on the left. Let's push on the right. Let's try and get the interference matrix. GuMiHo doesn't actually do a lot of that. Byun does. But Byun might not get a chance to do all that because Creator is actually being far cheesier than Nightmare ever was. Byun is actually getting a Rax. Don't be deceived by the lack on the forefront, but it is only a single Rax. No second gas coming down. So Byun, without any knowledge of this incoming 2 gates, and also with, well, one of the quote-unquote greedier builds you can do, not a factory expand, could be in a little bit of trouble. Yesterday, well, because we casted it a couple days ago, but the last group did have both Protosses in the group advance. Shocking. Could we have that again here today? Well, Nightmare won't advance to the winners, but Creator could. He beats Byun. Starting things off with a bang. Byun, with still 0 scouting, does at the very least high ground command center, and he does do this more often, I think, than a lot of other Terrans, actually. He will run Rax expand, but then he doesn't really make that tiny little step forward into even more macro by going on the low ground. He's like, well, now, you know, it's like a little, it's not a factory expand, but I'm still kind of scared of your early game potential. And he's certainly right to be a little scared in this game. This Reaper is going to find, well, no technology and no second gas. Like, the no second gas is going to be the first scary thing, I guess. And then no technology. And then, hey, that Nexus is awfully late. That's weird. Oh, wait, there's units in my base. The units already being in the base is a little concerning. The reactor only just finished, so we're talking about no units on the defensive and no wall either. The Cyclone's coming out. No tech labs being built, no reactor either. Now, a very good surround on the Stalker. Kudos on that, but already the SCVs are going down. The Stalker is able to escape. Nice micro there from Creator. And that Stalker will be able to get a couple of the last shots on the weakened SCVs as well. Regain some shields too, and Byun is in a decent amount of trouble. The Cyclone will take care of everything. Big Papa Cyclone will finally do its babysitting duties, but only after 12 of its babies died. All right, that's an entire family from the 1800s just gone. That's not usually a great feeling. Overall, down 8 workers, though, and that's not the worst. Thank goodness for the Cyclone being able to be built so quickly nowadays, right? Because that's basically the cutoff. If any more SCVs had gone down, or if this somehow failed in a similar fashion as a factory expand, well, then I'd be a little concerned for Byun. But with his 1 Rex expands up and running, although not on the natural, obviously, 2 Cyclones to defend from any further damage, ideally. This 1 Cyclone will die, but it's a trade. Tit for tat. More than a trade, actually. Creator may be regretting going after that. Maybe a little, yeah. Anyway, Byun will be able to produce 2 SCVs at a time, catching up a little bit, right? As Creator's Nexus only recently finished, but then also 2 mules, and that's the really important thing. 2 mules basically covers 8 worker difference. There's a little more math to it, but don't challenge me, all right? It's basically 8 workers. So Byun's actually already on the road to recovery, and never forget that Creator really delayed his technology. And generally what happens is that the Terran factory is a bigger bully in the game until you talk about, like, shield batteries obviously helping, maybe a drastic number of units, which Creator has lost in this game as he ends up trading out 2 for 2 there. And they start to have upgrades, really microble units like Blink Stalkers. So it's a little scary right now, but Creator will hold on against trades. Again, trades, and actually some that don't favor Creator. He lost 2 more Stalkers than Byun did Cyclones, and they cost the same, so doesn't feel super great. And you know that there's only that much of a delay from a Terran player who is producing Cyclones. They still have a barracks. They could still produce another barracks. It's only minerals after all. And they could actually be starting up their stem. The biggest loss is that the factory isn't producing tanks, which do a little bit better as you head into the later stages. And that it's not helping to produce add-ons for anything else. I mean, otherwise the Cyclones are totally fine option. Like I said, they've been trading. Creator gonna go for a follow-up 4 gate. Not exactly uncommon from a proxy gates, but a little less than ideal, as he did have to add another gateway. This one was killed in a really perfect game from the Protoss perspective. This gateway is still alive. You still have those 5 Stalkers alive, which is really the ideal scenario. But let's say 3 Stalkers alive. And so you have 7 in total now that are able to help a little bit more against any follow-up drop that might happen, which is almost inevitable. And obviously will add into the actual 4 gate itself. This is just a Cyclone drop, not the scariest thing in the world, but deserving some respect. Some Stalkers will have to stay at home. Creator not full-on committing to a 4-gate, does grab a third Nexus very quickly, so really not full-on committing to this. And we got Byun kind of changing his plans right now, perhaps off of some scouting. He doesn't know about the third Nexus, no fourth gas. Or maybe just thinking that that wasn't the ideal situation. I think he was building a tech lab. I'm gonna assume. I didn't actually look at the gas and minerals that were lost. I went temporarily blind. But anyway, that's what I assume. And now he's going into just the 3 racks and the 1-1 as well. Creator does have a Warp Prism. Creator does have the ability to produce 4 stalkers at a time, and so Creator does have the ability to harass, but I'll say harass. I'm pretty sure he won't be able to break this. 2 tanks is the bare minimum, but they are protecting each other. Bunker as well, and a little Sim City, so the stalkers are less likely to be able to retreat. They actually find a pretty perfect blink in point, because they blinked onto the high ground tank. Nonetheless, they are not allowed to kill that bunker, and 3 more stalkers gave up their lives for that. So 3 stalkers for a tank, you always want to consider the impact of a tank, the necessity of a tank to defend against further warp-ins, yes, but in terms of a direct trade, not worth it for Creator, who again is at a similar point to what I was discussing earlier, but even worse actually. Not only is he later to technology that's really going to help him, because Blink Stalkers fall off drastically against Bio, but he also is now down workers, and that's really bad. Down 2 workers when he's supposed to be up by 10, or actually even upwards to like 14, honestly, because he's going for a gateway-based army. He's not trying to get into Colossus. You'd really want to have a really powerful economy and then be spamming the armies at this point, trying to get more than your opponent has, almost like a Zerg situation. Medevac was finally cleaned up. It didn't really do a whole lot, but again, kept some stalkers at home. Now the stalkers and zealots and Warp Prism on the front line are tasked with buying time. Creator should know that he's in some trouble here. Observer gets denied as well, so now the Warp Prism takes a little bit more of a risk whenever it tries to enter into the main, and Double Widow Mines are actually preparing themselves in that little clever area behind the Vespian Geyser. Oh god, Creator needs his Warp Prism alive so badly. That is the only thing that is scaring a Terran player right now. But speaking of drops, look at this. Byun actually managed to avoid those stalkers off to the right. I think they only just got over there. So he fully unloads into the main base. And Creator is without a lot of units. Let's say that. No recall in the main either. And if he does recall, he's recalling stalkers into Bio. It's not good. Zealot's dying before they really any swipes in, and Creator knows that there's way too much damage in a game, which he was already losing. So Byun will win the first game. In the bottom right of Oceanborn, it is Byun, who is now up 1. And in the top left, it is Creator. Creator not having the best game, actually. I think it actually started off kind of okay. Just barely getting to that 8-worker lead is maybe not even exactly, just again because of the way that these units and races can scale and whatnot, but I would say it was enough to warrant the 2-gate. Plus Byun's command center being on the high ground, yes, made it so that he only had to defend one base, and that's nice. It was still a little later to saturating the natural. So, yeah, I feel like Creator did enough, but then obviously still had to do best possible job, whatever happened after. And that included trying to tackle the Cyclone issue. And unfortunately, Creator never really did. What can happen is either you entirely evacuate on the forward position, you just start warping it back at home, and the Cyclones, yeah, there's 3 of them alive, but then you have a shield battery, you have 6 stalkers, it's not that bad. Or you win barely against the Cyclone numbers, you know? Because what happened was the opposite. Creator was very close to winning some of the micro-engagements against the Cyclones, but then it went the opposite way, or they traded again, which is still not the best scenario. And so it snowballed more in the direction of Byun. Not a huge snowball, mind you. His counterattack did absolutely nothing, but still. When it's a very, I think, momentum and rhythm-based opener like Creator was doing, the 2-gate into the 4-gate, giving that ease of mind to the Terran player that they actually have survived, they can get their expansion down, they can get ready for the next step is actually quite a bit. But what is Creator going to do in game number 2? Not proxy gate, that's for sure. Twilight Council perhaps hit again. Byun with the 1 Rex expand on the high ground. That's what he likes to do. It does hit his economy in a very macro-oriented game. There's really no denying that. But it does mean that maybe Protosses should be a little less likely to go for something like a proxy gate. Either like a max pack, which no one really does anymore, actually. Or an actual 2-gate proxy gate. You know, I think that 3-gate that Max Pax does would probably still be good against Byun. I'm sure he's done it against Byun, in fact. Max Pax plays the North American Open Cup, and so does Byun. But execution would then be the most important thing. Oh, Byun has really changed it up, in fact. A little bit different from our expectations. Byun throws him 3 CCs, of course, because you just do as a professional, but in TvP, definitely not as much. And so 3cc is going to be a surprise to Creator, who has opted for a Twilight Council once again. This gives you really the latest, yeah, literally the latest scout. Unless your Adept gets into the main base, which it shouldn't. Byun, you know, he is fine revealing that his natural is up and running. He wasn't trying to fake Creator out as far as it being a factory expand. But is definitely going to feel safe, especially once he sees the Twilight Council. Which he did, yeah. And knowing that the 3rd CC is not going to be scouted. Now, the 3rd CC against a 4-gate, which Creator just did kind of in a wacky way because it first started off with a proxy gate. If this was a direct 2-4 gates, the most optimal build possible, then Byun would still have to be a little concerned. But I've talked about it before. The 3cc can actually beat the 4-gate. It's not going to be a 4-gate anyway. So we're kind of going back into our last TvP discussion where it's basically, this is a middle-of-the-road build, and Byun's doing the extreme build. And middle-of-the-road has a tough time against the extremes. Ideally, you either want the same extremes, so macro versus macro, or the opposite extremes, an all-in versus super hard macro. And so middle-of-the-road, safety-first type of situation is going to hurt a lot. Creator is not going to feel good about this game when he sees that it is 3cc, but who would expect Byun to do that? Byun's so much more likely to go into a 2-base attack, whether it is off a 1 Rax or a factory expand. He's done both. And instead, that 3rd CC into nothing but bio production. No amount of technology or harassment. And Creator might still be waiting, you know, like, okay, it's gonna come, it's gonna come, it's gonna come, it's gonna come. And then also might be making units because of that. Now, he does get a 3rd Nexus up. It's not too bad. Only producing so many units, 5 of them. But he does need to get a scout on the fact that it's a 3rd CC. More and more, he's getting suspicious of it. You know, first of all, it's not a Widowmine drop. Widowmine drop would have hit right now, basically. Could be a Raven opener. Could be very safe Raven, just a couple of tanks. But so far, no tanks have been revealed either. And the less tanks revealed, no Cyclones, no Widowmine drop, the more that you're wondering, is that factory late? What is it doing? Sentry will send a hallucination forward. And this is going to scout the 3rd CC. Dedication to the barracks first, and Creator will know that, well, I mean, there's not much you could have done about it, to be fair, but it's still, the knowledge here of the Terran getting away with it does suck. There's just nothing you can do. You can't just turn around and say, well, now I'm going to all-in you. It doesn't work like that. Double Forge, though, is a proper response right there. Unfortunately, fitting that all-in before Byun's attack, which, you know, still happened probably with the 2 medevacs. Not going to happen. He's going to be relying on very, very smart positioning. Some shield batteries, maybe a couple of force fields. Observers, plural, yeah, you know, to get that proper positioning. And Byun will not have a Raven, that's for sure. So no need to worry about your observers living, well, for the most part. Very tricky location there. And the very, very typical TvP before our eyes. One in which I favor Byun. 100%, but see what Creator can do. It's not the first time that a Protoss player opted for a Twilight Council opener and then went, oh no, I didn't do anything to the guy. Or I didn't get the most macro game that I could have. Oh gosh, happens all the time. Byun's first attack is on the way. 2 medevacs, not a whole lot of healing, but 9 Marauders. And the Stalker's not paying attention. One of them does die, another one gets injured. Creator knows what the army is currently coming from, but it's so much bio that, well, exactly, this could happen. Still a decent number of units off to the right, as well as 16 off to the left, and that's just not enough Protoss, man. What are you supposed to do against this? The shield battery might have been it. No, that actually would not have been enough. I don't know how Creator would split against that. I'm pretty sure you just don't. I think you would, like, sacrifice a bait, not let it get killed, because the game over, by the way. No hype here. The game is pretty much over. But I think you would just have to let the base take a pounding for a hot second. Save the probes, obviously, like pull the probes away. But I really don't know. He did not have enough units to split no matter what direction. If he had one Colossus over here and Gateway over here, the shield battery still wouldn't have covered his 3 Stalkers in like 2 sentries. The bio still would have killed it. If he had the opposite, I'm pretty sure that's still the case as well. And that was literally his army, guys. Well, Byun's on 3 bases. Just a reminder here. This is not some situation in which he 2-base committed and now is done damage, but maybe not enough. Definitely not enough damage. Wouldn't mind even popping off right there, too. Medevac still flying around. Constantly a threat. This one just boosting on into the 3rd base. Those are Zealots and not Charge. And not Blink. So, oh god, little baby Jesus. Would Mine will not do the maximum amount of damage, but that's still, as I said, so much to consider. 3 Medevacs potentially. Okay, well now 2 drops as 2 Medevacs go flying home. All Medevacs will go flying home. Alright. So the drops will stop. But then what does that mean? Well, it probably means that Byun's preparing for the killing blow. Creator not going to just sit back and wait for that to happen. It's actually going to take an aggressive stance, which I absolutely believe is the best thing to do. No more probes are on the way. Nothing but gateway units. Well, once he's on supply blocked. To try and somehow turn this game around. Hope to find Byun in kind of a vulnerable scenario. But Byun's army is huge. Even upgrades as well. A decent amount of medevacs, and certainly a good number of marauders. And Byun actually is going to go for the attack. Okay, no, he's going to run back into the Sim City with so many charge lots. That is going to be very helpful, but now realizing it's time to strike, the Wood Mine's injuring so many of those Zealots. SCV's pulled as they know that they just have to hold on right here. And Creator is getting some return damage done, no doubt about that, but still so much bio left over. And again, so much healing as well. Those Colossus can only do so much. War Prism Micro coming in here to try and save the day. But soon enough, those Colossus will be without any support. And without support, the Vikings will chip away at them. A couple of Marauders hanging on till the very last against these few Zealots that are warped in. War Prism goes down, Colossus will fall, and more reinforcement from Byun on the front doorstep means that Creator will not get the snowball that he was hoping for. That will not win the game. It was a very, very solid attempt, but Byun will hold, and Byun will pretty easily 2-0 Creator and move over to the winner's match for TvT against GuMiHo. Winner's match time, guaranteed Terran success. In the top right, the blue Terran is Byun for Shopify Rebellion. I'm actually wearing their hoodie they sent me here today. Bottom left of Hecate, it is going to be GuMiHo playing for Cloud9. And if anyone from Cloud9 is watching, I love your designs, I love your colors, and I would love a hoodie. That'd be great. I would wear it, for sure. But I only have so many hoodies now. It used to be that you'd get them all the time, you know? And then, basically, esports people complained that what they got all the time were t-shirts and hoodies. So, people either, you know, stopped giving out free stuff, or they started giving out more interesting free stuff. Something that wasn't going to just make everyone's entire wardrobe esports focused. I think that's literally why. So I just remember so much more stuff. I mean, not even that I remember. I literally did my laundry today and was putting stuff away, and there's an entire drawer in my dresser that is dedicated to my esports stuff that I never found, you know, incredibly wearable, like jerseys. I really wanted to wear jerseys, but yeah. Well, now it's been however many years, and my Ting hoodie is basically unwearable. It's so threadbare. I don't want to destroy it. My Discord hoodie is getting really, pilly. Is that the right word? I think that's the right word. I need more hoodies, guys. That's what I'm trying to get at. Anyway, TvT. We do have a 1-Rex expand from Byun and a factory expand from GuMiHo. As far as these players matching up against each other, I mean, both of them can be aggressive in TvT. Both of them can do macro in TvT. The biggest difference that I probably don't need to tell you guys, but just in case you don't know, is that one will go for mech often, the other one almost never. GuMiHo is the one that goes mech often. Maybe not often, but more likely than anyone else. Byun is the one who would not. He will occasionally be forced into it, like at Atlanta, for instance, when that Cyclone meta just popped its head up. Not the opening Cyclones, but the like 20 versus 20 Cyclones. Byun did play 1 or 2 of those games, but it really felt reluctant. He was good with it, but it definitely didn't feel like a Byun thing. So, yeah, still in my eyes, he's very much determined not to do that. Bio player to the core. But he will absolutely open with a Cyclone opener because, well, that's what you gotta do. It's also something that takes advantage of someone who's very much a micro-oriented guy. Even though I wouldn't necessarily call GuMiHo a macro player, the strength is his macro, because really his strength is strategy, right? He actually sometimes has subpar macro for a professional. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's but he is also very capable of doing, you know, 1 base, 2 base, 3 base all-ins. But I would say maybe more likely to have super long games than Byun. I guess that's the best way I can put it. Just more likely to have super long games. Yeah. But the Cyclone openers, sometimes the games don't go long at all. We do have both players opting for them. Very similar, but clearly a little different, with the openers being a little different. Natural command center already done for Byun. GuMiHo still turning into an orbital. So that's going to be about a 2-worker lead for Byun. Generally it happens. And then it looks like Byun is going to opt to go into more Cyclones. Reactored Cyclones. And GuMiHo might, after this production round, I'm still going to actually hold off on saying that he won't, but let's, one second. Okay, no, he's not going to go into reactored Cyclones. So that's a huge difference coming through here. Now, GuMiHo's medevac drop will hit first. Just makes sense, but Byun's not very far behind. Good pull away there from Byun. Making his job easier to defend, basically, instead of trying to chase this around with whatever he does have. And, by the way, it's only a Reaper and a Hellion. So he actually is just buying time, too. The 2 Cyclones pop for Byun. GuMiHo will be able to get out before being locked on. That's the most important thing. So 5 SCVs go down, giving GuMiHo a 2-worker lead. It looks like GuMiHo is well aware that a drop could be on the way, too. I mean, there's been a significant lack of units from Byun defending against this drop, right? But Byun, actually, in a kind of twist here, isn't going to go for the drop at all. Oh, it does get a lock on the medevac, so he's going to not kill the medevac, but he's going to take care of the drop. Usually, even if you're only with 1 Cyclone like we see here from Byun, you still try and go for the drop a little bit. But he is just going to entirely give up on the idea. Intercept the medevac on the retreat. That's really nice. And it might have been a better idea. In this particular game, that 1 medevac drop, that 1 Cyclone might have done some damage, but it's really arguable that it would do enough to warrant its multitasking, basically. And then there is a chance that GuMiHo was opting for follow-up reactored Cyclones too, and then there's a pretty big chance that your medevac does get shot down, much like GuMiHo's. So probably the wiser thing here for Byun. Pull back, come back later. Now he has 2 Cyclones, but again, the risk of GuMiHo having Cyclones, many Cyclones, is also there. So you gotta be very, very careful. Right now it's 4 Cyclones for Byun to just the 1 of GuMiHo. So, in fact, it could be a situation where Byun would be having kind of a fun time in the main, if he knew for a fact. And of course he doesn't. Oh, and the interference matrix is also a concern. With that upgrade literally finishing as I'm speaking. Already done for Byun, who opted for 2 Ravens much faster, but then GuMiHo went for 3 Ravens after everything is said and done. Actually 4. GuMiHo keeps catching me off guard with the number of Ravens. And this is going to be scouted as well from Byun. I mean, you're pretty sure that's not a Banshee popping out, so that's just a very extended Raven production time. Medevac is not going to be able to pick up these Cyclones, unfortunately, but it is going to catch a Raven, or rather the Cyclones did. And the Medevac itself can actually still escape. So, not too bad at all. Not too shabby. And I think GuMiHo also had his Ravens positioned to go for harassment, but they have yet to. So, Couple of SCVs taken down for both parties. Byun with twice as many workers killed, but then the faster command center, so he's actually still ahead by 2 workers. All right, then. Third CC is also turning into an orbital as GuMiHo has opted for... Oh, there it is. I was like, oh, definitely not 2-basing. He went for his third CC a little bit faster, actually. Might also get it on location faster, because GuMiHo is the one to push out first. He scans the main, sees that it is 3cc intention, a little bit later than his own. But now it's a question of where Byun's army is. GuMiHo going up the guts of the map, not scouted thus far. Byun gets a feeling, however. I think that's literally all it is. He just figured that GuMiHo was going to push, so he positions his tanks off to the left, where no Terran would expect it, and abuses that ramp. Auto turret's also coming down, and GuMiHo is slapped away with such an easy-looking maneuver. But that maneuver was actually really smart there from Byun, but of course is also getting some damage done on GuMiHo's natural. Third CC also went the wrong direction, or I guess it was trying to take its horizontal placement, but then didn't want to against the Cyclones. Yeah, now gonna check the triangle, so it's even more awkward. GuMiHo also still denied entry into the natural, though he doesn't actually know that it's kind of vulnerable. He just is cautious. Now he's going to realize that Byun simply isn't paying attention. Byun does pay attention in time to save the Ravens, but so much of his army was sent over in a drop. 2 tanks sieged up already, not quite able to hit GuMiHo's. GuMiHo is going to at least take care of the Marines. GuMiHo, though, at this point has to do so much damage. Interference switch on Byun's tank is going to help him do that damage, but making up for 40 SCVs killed won't happen too quickly, and the Vikings landing with the just remnants of Marine reinforcements will be enough to stop GuMiHo from a successful base trade, and that is that. Byun, with a really smart TvT, makes taking down GuMiHo look easy. Now we're on Site Delta for Game 2. Bottom right, Byun. Top left, GuMiHo. Byun, as I said, playing a very intelligent TvT. He was obviously not relying on himself having the better multitasking or micro, because in opportunities where maybe he could have shown off that he did, he chose to take the safe path and retreat. And then when he would have maybe had some trouble, honestly, against GuMiHo's push right down the middle of the map, he was going to be outgunned in terms of Ravens, and I think he had enough... He only had as many tanks as there were interference matrix. Maybe even less, actually. So GuMiHo would have been able to disable all of Byun's tanks and get auto turrets down. That's also pretty scary. But then Byun was really smart about it, dealt with that as well. Thought it was very odd the way that he was moving his army, but once he realized what it was for, it was perfect. GuMiHo was not anticipating that at all. And I think that alone really cemented Byun's position in the game. Otherwise, there were certainly good things happening for GuMiHo. Very strong army. Was supposed to have the faster third CC if it wasn't for that delayed third CC location. And, well, yeah, I think it's those 2 things, actually. But very powerful 2 things, alright? Byun is going, once again, into the 1x expand. This time, GuMiHo is also doing it. We got some SCV scouting. Byun doing the anti-proxy scouts, whereas GuMiHo is just literally doing the scout. So Byun knows that it's not a particularly close proxy of barracks anyway. Technically, they could have been down here. GuMiHo knows for a fact that this is a 1x expand. That really shouldn't change up any decision-making, though, unfortunately. I mean, information is power and all that and whatever, but in this case, in this matchup, I would say not so much. Byun's probably going to feel very comfortable doing the build that he was planning on doing as far as the amount of Reapers, the timing of the reactor, the factory, whatever. And obviously ditto on GuMiHo. GuMiHo might have a little more confidence as far as his Reaper's aggressiveness. Yeah, I think we're seeing that right now. Where Byun obviously kept his at home. But it's like, what does it really matter? Not much. Marine pops out. It does pop out fairly quickly. And you see that Byun even realized he was going to ultimately win the battle, so moved in aggressively. Very nicely done. Good reaction against GuMiHo's attempt to circumvent the army. And Byun's just playing so freaking well, actually. I mean, his TvP was almost humdrum. And this TvT is really not all that exciting, for being honest, but that's actually kind of abnormal, I think, for Byun, and probably a good sign. As much as it is fun to watch Byun just try and, again, out-multitask someone, so you have him running around and gunning everything down and being cool and making comebacks happen, you know, it's probably not the safest way to play. So, I mean, this, just watching him make all these matchups and all these players look like he has them figured out, no problem. That's a very good sign. Cleans up GuMiHo's sacrificial attack. Sea Reapers knew they were on a suicide path. And only lost one SCV in the process, so it's quite good. Now, both of them did the same opener as far as the command center timing, so in the end of the day, GuMiHo does hold on to a 1-worker lead. Okay, sure. But we do have Byun now with a couple of units looking for some revenge. A Hellion and a Reaper. If they do just suicide themselves onto the SCV line, could kill 2, if not all 4 SCVs in the natural currently. Byun doesn't know that. And is actually going to use these 2 units to add in a little more distraction. He is once again sending a medevac over with a Cyclone and 2 Marines. It's the same opener they did last game. GuMiHo with a very different opener at the end of the day. Also changed up the units he got out of his 1-1-1. The Reaper of Byun just scouted the positioning of the Cyclone as well as the 3rd CC, and it saw that the starport was producing something without a tech lab, so this gave him all the information in the world. It means that he's on a timer because a Viking is on the way, but then he can still do a drop right now because the Cyclone clearly isn't in the natural, so still pretty freaking nice. And the Cyclone, even if it got a lock on to the medevac, wouldn't be able to kill it fast enough. Doesn't get a lock on to the medevac anyway. That was on the Cyclone. Somehow GuMiHo's Hellion gets in. Marine's unable to shoot it down in time. Gets a little bit of a scout, and it did see as well that Byun Starport did not have a tech lab on it, so could have been a Viking, but then a Viking would have been... Oh, well. Never mind. Scouts said it's a Liberator. It's Liberator, by the way. I don't know why it came back. I guess he was afraid a drop was about to hit him, too. Because that's... Oh, no, that's clearly the 3rd option of a tech labless starport. So that must have been... He must have thought that the Hellion was about to be paired up with a double Cyclone drop or something, and the Liberator had to help. Otherwise... Yeah, so the Liberator just roamed around. So yeah, now GuMiHo knows that it's a Liberator. Viking is already out, Cyclone is in place, and the Liberator is frankly unlikely to do very much. What is most likely to do is distract, and Byun's going to take advantage of that distraction, push out with his army, which is kind of... It's not ragtag, but it's almost like an old army at this point. You see so many Raven openers, and sometimes it's 1 Raven, and that itself is already interesting, because so much of TvT is around 2, 3, or in GuMiHo's case, sometimes 4. But this went right into the Vikings after that Liberator, which is like almost an older way of playing. It's very much positionally based. Tanks are covered by the Vikings to a certain extent, and then cover the Liberator to a certain extent. And GuMiHo, if he was going into Ravens, would have that firepower, would have that burst damage. The burst versus the positioning. But he's actually gone into faster barracks production. Now, this could give him an advantage if he holds on. He's going to have more bio. He's eventually going to have the tools to play a more mid to late game TvT much faster than what Byun has. But his current problem is basically range. Like, he can't do anything against these ranged units as well positioned as they are as well. GuMiHo tries to get on top of the tanks before things stop him from being able to shoot, and then he doesn't quite kill Byun's tanks. And in fact, GuMiHo might just be losing game 2 right here, right now. Vikings land, then pick up again. The SCVs are being pulled into the slaughter as the tanks of GuMiHo aren't even helping anymore. And that is it. Byun, with a quick, simple 2-0 into 2-0, dominates Group C. And GuMiHo will be awaiting the winner of the upcoming match, which is going to be... Hold on. Creator versus Nightmare. So the loser's match will be a PvP. All is right in the world. In the bottom right it is Nightmare, in the top left it is Creator. Just making a joke off of Protoss woes. Because I am not Protoss. I am not a pro gamer Protoss at the very least. So my success doesn't depend on balance. Yeah. Anyway, actually, Creator is kind of one of the only, I think, outspoken Protosses really about the state of Protoss. In Hero is directly asked in an interview with Crank. He also commented on the state of Protoss in the grand scheme of things, but a lot of Protosses, well, don't have a lot to say, or don't really want to say it loudly, I suppose. Creator is one of the more emphatic persons of the scene. You know, he's sometimes emotional, but he's also got strong opinions. And he really does believe that PvT is, well, at the very least, difficult. I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but he definitely talks about it being very difficult. So there is that. But PvP, a whole other beast, one in which I think Creator is going to feel very comfortable in, even though he is facing Nightmare, who is a tricky Protoss in any matchup, but particularly PvP, which is an overall tricky matchup. So that's good news for Creator. But the bad news is he's have to face GuMiHo again. No, that'd be the first time they face each other. That's right. But he'd have to face another Terran. But he has to get there first, so we'll see if he does. We got some typical PvP openers, 2-gate versus 2 gates. It is Korean PvP, so not be shocked if both players end up 3-gating each other. It would be kind of funny. But in case of, I guess, who might be more inclined to go offensive versus defensive, probably Nightmare more offensive, Creator defensive. It's just so hard to call in PvP. Anyone could do anything. 2 Adepts coming out for Nightmare versus 2 Stalkers for Creator. Both of these openers can sometimes lead to, let's say, Adepts going to Stargate, Stalkers going to Robo, but they also can lead into Nexus, clearly. And so that's the real rub here. Both players wanting to figure out if it is in fact a Nexus going down. There was no proxy pylon, and they won't be able to determine anything suspicious based off the gateway units, really. The lack of Nexus will eventually get suspicious, but even that is, you know, just because it's delayed doesn't mean that it's an all-in, obviously. It could just be a Stargate first, which actually could be even very likely from a 2-Adept opener. So many things to consider, and only really one way to really think of how to scout it, and that's go to Sentries. So Creator, he didn't split the production Stalker Sentry, which is maybe the most typical macro opener. But basically gets to the same thing, doesn't it? 2 Stalkers first, a little more attack power, a little better at maybe catching these Adepts as well. Obviously the Sentries wouldn't want to go do that. And then the Sentries provide the hallucination and force fields, in case that is necessary. Just might be, honestly. Now, Creator let his pylon finish in Nightmare's natural, so that is the understandable delay of the Nexus. But what Creator cannot tell until the hallucination is, of course, if it was even a Nexus at all. Twilight Council kind of gives me the feeling that it won't be, I guess, it is going to be a Nexus, but I guess it won't be a necessarily total macro game, I suppose. Nightmare could invest into a decent amount of Stalkers. You know, really delay his 3rd Nexus, I guess, is really what I'm talking about, and then try and kill Creator, which... yeah, isn't a 1-base build, but still pretty aggressive. Creator is going to scout that this is the thing. He's going to scout the late Nexus. Twilight Council obviously came down first, and he's going to know he's severely behind in Blink. He actually was already going into a Robo, though, before the hallucination came out, I'm pretty sure. That is a very safe opener. Particularly against someone, I guess, who is going into Blink. Actually, if this was Stargate, then it may be a little awkward. Once the Immortals don't shoot up against the Oracles or Phoenix, if that could have been the play. Well, Nightmare's certainly not going to be going for any type of Roberless, like, proxy gate 2-base attack, which I actually was kind of thinking he would. He's getting at least a Robo. Could still get a Warp Prism and all that. But we got ourselves 2 similar technologies at this point, as Creator obviously going to add on his own Twilight Council, get to his own Blink. That's the way the PvP goes. I was far more worried about an attack of Stalkers than it was about DTs as well, as he got the Immortal first into the Observer, and I guess it was worth mentioning that DTs could have been a thing. He could have canceled Blink. Creator actually the one pushing out. I mean, I get it. He's got Big Papa Immortal. Does he, though? Where the hell is it? There you are. And he's got Force Fields, but Blink is almost done. And, the number of Blink Stalkers could really be the problem, obviously. Now, that Adept didn't quite see the Robo, I don't think, so there could be 2 gateways. There could be 4 Stalkers being produced the entire time that Creator was walking over here, and then he's facing 14 Stalkers instead of just 10, and then it's kind of questionable having your army in such a position. But whatever it is, Creator kind of gets away with the move out, doesn't get the Adepts into the main, doesn't get a full scout either, provides a little bit of pressure. It's somewhat of a scout in his opponent's Robo. That third Nexus comes down faster for Creator. For Nightmare, does seem like he is also intending to get a third Nexus, so no one actually being aggressive at all. And ooh, I call that as a blink, because that's just the way that so many PvPs go, but Creator actually going into a Charge, Immortal, and then eventually Archon build. It's not going to be from Templar Archives, though. It's going to be from a Dark Shrine. This hallucination, dangerously close to scouting it, but stops shorts. It's only at the third Nexus. Oh, because it's going to let the socket in, of course. That old conundrum. Well, the hallucination still has not scouted that Dark Shrine. And these stalkers might not be bold enough to go back there. Oh, they are extremely bold. Well, they might lose their lives, but they did get the scout. Yeah, 2 stalkers die. 6 probes in the DT scout, though. Probably worth it. I mean, the DT scout alone, he does have a robo. The lack of observation wasn't necessarily the problem. It was the positioning of the observers, which now should be totally fine. Regardless of that being scouted, though, that's kind of the annoying thing about this type of PvP is that the Dark Shrine is going to be useful no matter what. It either makes the Archons that go part of the charge Archon dynamic, a little more expensive on the minerals, but still, or it's a constant threat. You constantly have to worry about where your observers are, or if you should afford cannons in your natural already. It's not like a one-base DT build, but if you scout it, it's just basically game over. Now, this is still going to be very useful. Creator managing to have a 2-worker lead for the majority of this game, I think. A little spike with the probe damage. So, yeah. But he's gotten back up to a 2-worker lead. +1 a little faster for Nightmare, actually. Hallucinations from both players, just trying to get a feel on the compositions. Well, clearly Nightmare's gone into Blink, but now adding on that charge, it was a question of perhaps seeing any Templar Archives or Robotics Bay to see if there was any attempted addition of technology. There's not. Nightmare's going to be very gateway focused for a while. Templar Archives now being put down. The Creator with an Immortal Zealot Archon composition can actually do a pretty nasty 3-base attack. Ideally with +1 though, and that +1 is now getting chrono. There we go. But it's actually a very old school PvP thing. Sometimes talk even about the +2 3-base charge at Archon. Now we're close to that. A Nightmare is situation now, I would say, is basically buy time, scout, do all the things he wants to do with the stalkers, but then probably build as many Archons and charge lots as he can. The Archons will take on Creator's charge lots, and the opposite way also holds true. But then the Zealots will ideally take care of some of these Immortals, which Creator is now up to 4. What the hell's going on? DT managed to sneak on by and got some damage done despite the army being seemingly so well placed. +2 starts up lickety split for Nightmare, who will hold on to that lead. And Creator, well, is definitely looking for a 4th, the same similar time as Nightmare. And they're actually both just getting to such a similar composition. Creator could have tried 3-base attacking, putting all of his investment in charge lots, overwhelming his opponent before Nightmare has a comfortable Archon count of his own. That clearly hasn't happened. And so we're about to get the good old Protoss smush. Protoss kiss. And by that I mean just literally 2 action figures butting heads. Nah. Because it's not very micro-oriented, these types of engagements. You know, there's the stalkers that blink and concave and whatever else is involved, and it's a really interesting thing to watch. And then there's Charge Lot Archon Zealot. Charge Lot Archon Immortal, sorry, which is just... I got a slightly better concave. My Guardian Shield's up and running. My +2 finisher in the engagement. Although Nightmare is actually the first one to go into Disruptors, which I really like, in fact. I think there are, of course, situations where someone could get maxed out. Both could get maxed out, and then someone takes a better engagement. Equal upgrades, fairly even army hype, but then shield battery compositions, blah, blah, blah. But Disruptors are going to be the best thing against the clumped up army of your opponent, who is not particularly microable, if you can get to enough Disruptors, and that is currently the problem. Nightmare taking some resources away from building his army to building technology that is not ready yet, and Creator actually has decided to move out with his +2 Nightmare also with +2 and now warping in as much as he can, but he's also now in the worst position as far as the concave goes. Triple shield battery covering him, though. Even without the overcharge, I think that he's in a pretty good space. Zealot's doing some damage to Creator's economy back on his side of the map, and Creator's going to need to warp in there if he wants to stop the probe from going down, but it looks like he wants to pull the trigger instead. Going to go for the engagement. Disruptor is out. It's going to be looking for a shot on the big ball of charge, that's I would say, ideally. We also have a bit of a split army scenario. Creator's charge lots dipping into the probe line. Sometimes that's not a good thing, because then they're distracted, but in this case, they killed 17 probes and are still ready to go for the upcoming fight. Nightmare just not able to deal with the concave. 2 disruptors will be thrown out, but only managing to kill 1 unit is not going to be enough. Creator choosing the time to strike correctly here as he clearly is pushing through, kills the Nexus. Now Chargelot's coming back from Creator, but DTs are now a problem. Where are the observers? One does siege up, so the DTs won't be a permanent problem, but Creator just gave himself a base lead. Nightmare taking the bottom left one to try and make up for things, but he also took some army damage that Creator did not. Creator did take the probe damage, though, so actually it's still a weird scenario. Either player can still win from here on out. Nightmare's got disruptors. He's got +3 attack as well, about 70% done. And Creator now only has 1 shield battery to fall back to. A very, very important shield battery, though, with an overcharge available. And an immortal, I guess, army that can be micro with a warp prism, too. Don't disregard that. The 3 disruptors still really... Oh my good lord, most important thing about this army. Otherwise, only stalkers would get demolished by the charge light wraparound and the immortals. Good pick up there by the warp prism, by the way. And so Nightmare has to be very careful whenever he doesn't have disruptor shots, but since he is getting back up to 4 bases and he didn't actually lose, well, as much economy, he had a lot of probes to begin with, he can get into an actual stalker disruptor composition. And that's where the disruptor count gets high enough and the stalker count gets high enough as well. The stalkers can micro and concave and focus fire, and the disruptors can have almost endless shots. And then it's just so difficult for a non-mobile army such as the one that Creator has, although he is getting to blink now, to try and do anything about that. You just literally run forward into more and more disruptor shots and more focus fire by the blink stalker. So Creator does need to adapt, and going into more stalkers is definitely a good call. Use the other army units, like the charge lots especially, to perhaps go for run-bys and buy time. There is a chance, though, they can also still get a wraparound, and that's still a problem. Charge lots, I mean, they do clump initially, but then they spread. And once they spread, then the disruptors have a really tough time deciding how they use their shots. I think that's what Creator is hoping for. He has not moved on to his own disruptors after all. He is just looking to overwhelm this army that's so dependent on ammo. There's only 1 shot, and then the disruptors aren't very useful beyond that. One of those shots is pretty freaking good. We're going to need more than that. Nightmare has disruptors and the upgrade lead. He's got a 4 base economy as well. All he needs to do is hold right here, and he'll get better and better in this game. So many stalkers, actually, could try and focus fire down some of these critical units, but are also being distracted by the Nexus that is now under attack. Disruptors not really getting the shots off that they would want. Immortals spreading out in the nice concave to get as many good shots as possible, and more reinforcements coming in for Creator. His supply is dwindling, and Nightmare looks like he's going to be doing absolutely totally fine here, but where are the observers? Oh my god, no. No, not like this. Those are Creator's observers. Nightmare, where are your observers? DT is killing some critical units. Nightmare had a beautiful hold as he held on to his Nexus, although not his probes, and has that technology to work with as well. But Creator's DTs coming in hot, made at 6 minutes, coming in really useful at 15. Nightmare is going to still push on forward despite that lack of detection, kill his opponent's Nexus, but we got ourselves kind of a base trade scenario as DTs, of course, go in for the killing blow of Nightmare's 4th base. 3 base to 3 base. Creator's army woefully low, but where the hell are the observers? Nightmare, he has 2 robos. An observer finally pops out, but it's actually not correctly rallied. And of course, Creator's going to be watching for the observers of his opponent, although not watching his stalkers by the looks of things. Only 3 left over as they blink away. It's chaos every which way that we look, but the most chaotic thing are these freaking DTs. Creator should never be winning this game. Never. But oh my god, the observer goes to the middle of the map, right where Creator's anti-observer army is. Are you serious? The good news is Nightmare has cannons to fall back to, but he has lost a lot of at least the momentum that he had. He still has double plus the army supply of Creator. So it's certainly not a situation in which Creator has made a comeback as of yet. But this is his way to do it. Stalkers barely evacuating with the 4 observers in tow. 1 here for Nightmare holding that left side. And I think Nightmare still has got it. He still has the same economy, superior upgrades, and superior army. Creator knows that his one hope is to once again kill the Observer. He's going to see it coming in. Surveillance mode on his own observers, now on Nightmares as well, but obviously the dive is going to happen because it has to. That's the only way that Creator wins this game. Disruptor's going to punish that dive as well as the blink as well. Yeah, and that is going to be it. No way that Creator makes the comeback happen. Nightmare wins out in the PvP. And very smart decision making in there. And now Creator is on his last life. In the top left, up 1, he is Nightmare. On the bottom right, we have Creator. I believe these guys were previously teammates. Not sure about it anymore, though. As far as their recent history goes, Creator 1-2, Nightmare 1-2, Creator 1-2, Nightmare 1-1, Creator 1-1. Nightmare had a 5-win streak for a while. I guess overall in their history, Nightmare has been the better player. More recently? Yeah. But the most recent results are Creator favored. Literally the last 2 times. So this would be a bit of a surprise. A bit of a surprise if Nightmare ends up winning. Certainly as far as name recognition goes, Creator I think is more recognizable. He's got the whole passion thing going for him. But he has made deeper runs in tournaments than Nightmare. One of Nightmare's deepest, coolest runs, in fact, wasn't even broadcast. So that's just unfortunate. He had a really amazing lower bracket or knockout bracket run that no one saw. Anywho, let's check in the teams. I think they were both on Team NV. Oh, I think they still are. Okay, so they actually are teammates. And when you're teammates, there's a chance that you actually are practicing and talking about builds and stuff together. I say a chance because it's really not the situation for most teams, I would say. Teams are almost a formality. In StarCraft 2, you aren't expecting a lot from teammates as far as practice partners or discussions. But there's always a chance, particularly, I guess, for the same race teammates. But obviously knowing they're going to face each other in GSL, probably. They didn't have to face each other. Technically, it could have gone the way of no PvP, but yeah, they've probably been hiding strats. And if Nightmare was expected to be the more aggressive one, well, they did kind of subvert that expectation last game. Yeah, he opted for a faster Twilight Council, but still expanded. Yeah, he could have gone into something that was still 2-base oriented, but he didn't. And Creator was the one that was constantly scouting and then going into one of the more, I want to say inflexible composition. That's the best word I can think of for it. But going into Charge, Immortal, Archon doesn't have as many, I think, like, branches, I guess, off of it. You know, it's really a composition that would do well defensively, sure, but then we think a lot about 3-base attacks off of it. Because if you do try and play it like a super macro game, like we saw in the last game, in fact, there is a chance that your opponent with Blink Stalkers, and Blink Stalkers give you map control, give you harassment, give you focus fire, and can still take some decent fights as well, could go into Disruptors. And the Disruptors are ultimately the king. There's some diciness that we saw in that game, so it was a really great example of the situation I'm talking about, but it is ultimately the best thing to do. So, yeah, I think inflexible is the right word. Not so many 2-base Immortal Charge Archon attacks either these days, whereas 2-base Blink Stalker attacks can happen. Yeah. There's certainly a reason that you see 90% of the games be Blink oriented. Maybe a little less because Max Pax is in there constantly doing Stargate openers. We got a scuffle that will result in no deaths, apparently, though it was very close to resulting in a death. Both players expanding and getting into that blink, so much more of a mirror matchup. One more stalker for Nightmare, but then one less sentry. A couple more stalkers for him. And when you have this really identical tech and expansion process, the only difference that can happen is the timing of the gateways. So do you get your third Nexus up, like, immediately, like with only 2 gateways still the only production that you have? Well, that's pretty greedy, but it can happen. Do you opt for 2 more gateways? Do you proxy a gate? Do you just consistently warp in stalkers versus trying to go for an expansion? Our creator wasn't so much more consistent in his production than his opponent, but he does kind of get the jump on Nightmare there. Force-filled slice off one of Nightmare's sentries. But he does have more stalkers. Think that we're wary of a possible Stargate. I mean, as time has gone on, obviously Stargate's not in play, but I believe that's why the stalkers are on the main base. Adept's going to be caught, so not this one. It's actually going to get a very successful scout into the main. Again, what it could be seeing is maybe more gateways, or, I mean, technically a Dark Shrine as well, right? Which played a huge part in the last game. It's not enough. Didn't scout anything. Nightmare wants a little bit of revenge. He lost a sentry, he lost 2 probes. Be nice if he gets something in return. He does get a killed shield battery. With a very similar number of stalkers. The Guardian Shield would be active for Creator, and of course, Defender's Advantage would be active for Creator. Nightmare can't find a perfect moment to strike, but he's about to have Blink, and it is about 15 seconds faster than his opponent. He's playing a dangerous game, because of course, Creator's Blink could not be very far off, but it is actually a perfect moment. Now, that Guardian Shield from Creator's sentries are helping a lot, and the shield battery will finish in the nick of time. As Creator's numbers were starting to dwindle a little bit, his Guardian Shield was going to dissipate, but then he also still had those faster reinforcements. So really not a moment in which it could snowball completely in one person's favor, but Nightmare did try to strike when the iron was hot. His own third Nexus, similar time too, so that wasn't a big committal from him, as both players were warping in pretty similar. They were also teching in pretty similar ways, although... Okay, no, Creator did not skip his robo. There's an observer coming out right there, right then. So no one's skipping any technology, really. And let's see what they add on after. Charge coming in, lickety-split for Creator. Nightmare might be shortly behind him. +1's coming in as well. And no one did anything particularly sneaky. Both playing very standard PvP. A little more on the gateway count, though, for Nightmare. Okay, yeah. No, it's just like Creator was 1 second behind on that. So freaking similar, then. So freaking similar. And perhaps the biggest difference is the +1 timing. Faster for Nightmare and perhaps more chronoed. They're both chronoed. This is actually going to be the observing from here on out. We're just going to be looking at the forges. There's nothing out to look at until they have a bigger army. Just kidding. I'm giving myself a headache actually watching the spin. Fourth Nexus does come down much faster for Creator. Nope, not that much faster. Nightmare's probe was in position, planting pylons, so the Nexus is very, very identical. Jesus. It's about that +1. I'm telling you. It's about the +1. Creator's Warp Prism is a nod to the idea that he is going to be aggressive. At least open up some opportunities for harassment. That +1 is so much faster for Nightmare. I don't know. I don't know! 24-hour Forge channel. The forgiest of forges. Yep. All Forge all the time. And actually, I don't know about you, but I actually was kind of getting bothered. Because it's a spin and it's a blur. So I don't think I could watch it for more than 30 seconds. There's also a bunch of spinny things around it, too. Ugh. Nightmare, very quick to the +2, though. Talk about other things. Very quick to the +2, keeping that upgrade lead. What he is now falling behind on might be the Templar technology, although I can't imagine he's that far behind. He could... You know what? No. Wait. No. Yeah. No. Yeah. Okay, I was gonna say, you know what? He doesn't have a lot of gas. So he could be trying to go overboard with the Zealots, basically. And while Creator's 2 Archons will be worth their weight in gold, maybe not enough. That's usually what they start off with, is 2 Archons. Although it's 100 gas short, and Nightmare is looking for the attack. Not gonna wait for that +2 to finish. Gonna hope that it finishes as he finds a perfect engagement. Creator Stalkers were out and about. I'm actually not sure why they were over to the right side, to be honest. I guess they were planning on maybe attacking from the right with the Zealots from the left. That was really awkward. A couple Stalkers lose their lives. Immortal is coming out as maybe Creator is picking up on what Nightmare is doing. Hallucinations just got into the natural to see no gases. Whereas Creator had his 3rd gas for a lot longer, and obviously got his gases up on the 4th a little bit faster too. But Nightmare is now getting all of his gases, or close to it. Just the natural being skipped thus far, so they're actually getting a very identical gas count. And yet Nightmare still has yet to throw down that Templar Archives. In fact, throwing down cannons, making sure that no DTs surprise him. I would say he's thinking about that last game, but it is also a 4-base PvP, and it's just so expected for that to be the case. Someone usually has a Dark Shrine at this point. And Nightmare looked like he was going to push, decided not to. Creator's 5th base comes down as Nightmare's is a little faster, and again, I do anticipate Nightmare getting his own Templar Archives. 6 gases for Nightmare to 5, actually, as Creator adds on another technology in the form of Robotics Bay. Now, if Nightmare is warping in more consistently, then he's using that gas for Stalkers, and that explains that, sure. But now it is the question, technology versus army supply. That was somewhat of that last game. There's a lot to it, but that was certainly one of the issues. And it's going to be the same thing here. Can Creator get enough of the technology that he has to defend against the maxed out Nightmare Protoss army? Nightmare maxed out does kind of have to do something with it, and he is going to try and set up a 2-pronged attack. At least one little run by with a major attack off the left. No Warp Prism involved with this, however, for Nightmare. Kind of makes me doubt the legitimateness of it. Yeah, he's gonna actually fall back, but this is now it's gonna go in his favor the more that Creator chases, because Creator does not have endless number of Zealots, and his Archons will even start getting focus fired. Meanwhile, Creator is losing probes too, so this is a very successful distraction, and it shows the power of what a mainly or all Stalker army can do. Because even if Creator did have his Disruptors, obviously they still have a problem chasing. So you need to eventually corral Nightmare's army, which Nightmare is just not letting happen. He's very good about making sure he has an escape path. His harassment is dumb, but it did enough damage, and now he's the one up almost 30 workers and up in supply. His +3 is also much closer to finishing, about 20 seconds to go on that one, although I don't think he's really looking for a direct engagement, at least not yet. Perhaps with more units shaved off here, then he actually will pull the trigger, jump on top of everything left over. I mean, with the Archons and Immortal gone, you can really obviously tell you have more Stalkers. It's 51 to 22. Gotta be blind not to notice it. Oh, very aggressive blink, but fortunately for Nightmare, he one-shots both Disruptors. Creator back down to 0, still down 30 overall supply, and now down an upgrade too. Warp Prism is gonna be picked off. No, barely not. There was high ground vision, just couldn't quite reach it. And Creator's gonna try and come in from multiple directions, but he's gotta be careful. I mean, frankly, his army doesn't even really look like it's at 100. Here you go, combining it together looks a little bit stronger. The supply difference is mostly in those workers, but that's clearly important. Creator is getting more and more constrained to having a very resource-efficient army as he loses some of these skirmishes and he loses a 5th Nexus. Now he can have a very, very cost-efficient army. That is what Disruptors are great at, but only if Nightmare opens up the opportunity by running face first into the Disruptors that are once again building. 2 of them going to pop out and help this particular engagement. Nightmare just waiting for that before he blinks away. Yep, controlling things very nicely. And Nightmare has such a huge economy. He also is actually on another base here, almost an aggressive base at this point, that he can replace units over and over and over again. But he's not going to just try and replace units and win by butting his head against the wall constantly. He is also moving over into Disruptors. He now has triple Robo. 3 Disruptors at a time, potentially rallying right into Creator's face. That is the ideal scenario for Disruptors. And defensively, his own Disruptors still work, but now Creator has a problem even getting Disruptors. He is very, very low on minerals and gas. I mean, at this point, Creator... needs Nightmare to mess up. And Nightmare's been good about it so far. Triple Disruptor did pop for Nightmare. Doesn't look like the rally to the front, at least not yet. Creator knows that this could absolutely be an option. I wonder if he's going to use this army to try and run by, because it's getting less and less useful as time goes on. Oh, Disruptor on the front gets sniped right there. Upgrades are even. Oh, no, +1 are actually finished. Nightmare has better upgrades for his Stalkers. Another Disruptor of Creators gets pushed to the front just with the Stalkers blink microing. Gets focus fire down, and Nightmare feels very comfortable doing this because he knows that he has time on his side, and he has production on his side. And he has Disruptors on his side, that's right. So he has everything in the world to fall back to, should he ever even get close to being overly aggressive. Now Blink Stalkers able to blink away, but not oh my goodness, running back into the Disruptor shot. Never mind, I was going to say, the Zealots and Archons cannot run away. And that is still a decent amount of Creator's army. This is the last hurrah for our Red Protoss. He's on his last life, his last army, and it is not looking like it's going well. Shield Battery Overcharge also activated, and Creator knows. I think, yeah, this is when he would probably be pounding his desk. Didn't watch this live, but this is not looking like a good situation. I thought PvP would favor him, but Nightmare breaks the streak, the very tiny streak that Creator was on, and will be able to advance to face GuMiHo. Yet again, that will be a rematch, in fact. Maybe it'll go a little bit better than last time, which was close. Nightmare was close taking down GuMiHo, so it's very possible that Protoss will still advance. Nightmare not quite able to jump on top of this army yet, but he's getting pretty close to it. And the last Archon's dead. Now he can just focus fire the Immortal, if he wanted. I mean, if he doesn't even want to, he's going to just chase this down. There it is. There it is. And that is it. Nightmare with a 2-0 knocks Creator out of the GSL and will have his last chance to make it to the round of 8 by taking on GuMiHo. The decider match in the top right of Alcyone, it is Nightmare for Team NV. In the bottom left for Cloud9, it is GuMiHo. You're not seeing double. This is a rematch of the first preliminary match of the day. GuMiHo was able to take that 2-1. It was a little dicey, though, in the first game. The third game was easy peasy. GuMiHo seemed to have found the weakness in Nightmare's play, as far as the Twilight Council play goes anyway. Nightmare thought that the Twilight Council was doing better, because that's the game that he won, but yeah, he played a very defensive style against GuMiHo, actually, which eventually nipped him in the bud, because his defensive style included not really doing a whole lot of scouting. It doesn't have easy scouts, but then also the Stalkers were so defensively placed, they didn't get any information on GuMiHo's tank push, which is really scary. I mean, there doesn't seem to be something that a Protoss can do at every single PvT that keeps them totally safe, but it does feel like one of the safer things that seemed to be in fashion for its safety was like Phoenix Colossus. But then only some players seem to want to do that every single time. And that still comes with its own set of vulnerabilities, as we saw in our last group, in fact. It still can miss the drop and get too many units successfully placed, and then it dies. It happened with Classic Bunny. So, but it's not like Terran's without its own woes, of course. Terran does feel the need to be a build order genius, which GuMiHo kind of is, so that's good news for him. It is probably the best news for him in terms of this matchup, because otherwise, as far as the way that he ends up playing the game out, post-build order kind of situation, I'm not the biggest fan. You know, I think it's very evident the way I keep talking about it. I'm not sure if it really is his weakest matchup. It just doesn't give me the confident feeling that other Terran players in this matchup would give me. You know, Maru, I almost never think of him losing TvP. Cure, same. Clem, basically against anyone besides Max Pax. GuMiHo, I look at him versus anyone, and I'm like, oh, you gotta be careful, bro. But then occasionally his build orders and his strategizing works out brilliantly. He gets a very easy game, such as his first series versus Nightmare. Alright, so enough about the past. Let's talk about the currents. We got a Reaper getting into the main and seeing that it is a Stargate build, so Nightmare is bringing out the first game build that he did. Maybe he likes on this map. Maybe he is trying to just keep GuMiHo on his toes. But in this particular case, GuMiHo did opt for a Reaper opener, which isn't always guaranteed. got the Scout. And now with a second Reaper, thanks to a factory expand, GuMiHo will probably even see what is produced from that Stargate, which is the next question. Oracles or Phoenix? Wait, no, why do I keep saying that? Nightmare actually has yet to do a Stargate opener. I don't know. It's because it's usually the second option outside of Twilight Council is my excuse. He went for a Robo the very first game. Good lord. Yeah. Usually it's Twilight Council 70% of the time. I don't know. So often. Or Stargate, and then the Robo first is such a rare option. But I forgot that Nightmare literally did it. Alright, so this is the first time I went for a Stargate opener. GuMiHo scouted it. He's also now obviously scouted it as a Phoenix opener, and it is not ever one Phoenix. Basically. Yeah. No. He's going into a Phoenix, and then... Well, no. Well, yeah, I was going to say going into Phoenix, then one Oracle, then Twilight Council? That doesn't sound right. No. It's always going to be additional Phoenix. And then more so the question is now, Robo or Twilight Council? In my mind, Nightmare is still a guy who has done a lot of gateway-based attacks, so like Charged Phoenix is included, but it does feel like that's fallen by the wayside for most Protosses these days. Phoenix Colossus, as I was saying, before I remembered that Nightmare didn't actually do it, is considered kind of a very safe way of playing. It also has a lot of flexibility to it. You can be aggressive with the Phoenix. By aggressive, I mean go harass with them. They can go scout as well, something that the Twilight Council build can often find itself lacking. We can deal with a Raven opener, although in this case it didn't. GuMiHo, one of those guys who will abso-freaking-lutely go Raven despite the knowledge of his opponent going into Phoenix. So that is literally what is happening here. He knew it was Phoenix, and he still committed to a Raven. And because he went for so many Cyclones, Nightmare did not get the kill on the Raven, but it is so extremely likely that the Raven dies. It's very vulnerable to Phoenix. Not in this game, not yet. A lot of Cyclones, too. I mean, this is an interesting opener from GuMiHo, but it seems very much anti-Phoenix-minded. And I know I say that as I'm also saying Ravens don't do well against Phoenix, but this amount of Cyclones, with auto turrets coming down as well, if the Raven lives, what really deals with that? But if GuMiHo doesn't move out with this, then why so many Cyclones? You know, if you really wanted to have a rock-solid defense against Phoenix, well, 3 would have been fine to stop at. One Raven did just die, by the way, but at the consequence of another Phoenix. And Nightmare doesn't really want to be losing this Phoenix, to be clear. As much as GuMiHo's dedication to Cyclone is making me scratch my head, I mean, they've done their job as far as killing the Phoenix. It's just that the Cyclones will absolutely fall off in the mid-game. So he made this many Cyclones just to defend against the Phoenix? How did he not attack? Because even now that it's, 2 Immortals, I feel like isn't enough. No shield better on the 3rd, although there's a very forward position natural one. Adept's going to distract GuMiHo as he does finally move out. Oh, perfect timing on the Adept. So obnoxious. And that's going to be a couple of SCVs killed as they are one-shotting. Now the Cyclones on the fronts are 2 less, and now going up against a 3rd Immortal as well. I feel like it was a much stronger timing prior to this. This is oh, well, it's a distraction at the very least. Only 1 Phoenix, too, so as it gets dragged back into the auto turrets, that is nothing to kill this remaining Raven. Workers killed, roughly similar, in fact, now identical. And the Cyclones, well, I guess they're still kind of a useful army. I really, as the game gets into the mid-game, I really don't like Cyclones. They're kind of stupid. There's reasons they work versus Zerg, but versus Protoss is very different. Big delay on bio. As far as factory units that are useful, I'd put tanks and Widowmines up in a higher position as we get into a 7.5, 8-minute game. But we'll see. We got ourselves a weird scenario, potentially, as Nightmare decides to get aggressive. War Prism is out. Charge is done. Army is postured. And GuMiHo Cyclones, which if they're good at anything, it's map control, have entirely missed this. This is extremely awkward for GuMiHo. He's going to see what's going on and go, nope, 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 nope. But a Warp Prism in the main has gone entirely unscouted. SCVs will be lost. Very quick pull away from GuMiHo at the very least. And actually a very fine position here. Nice hold position. Beautifully done. Medevac's healing them up as well. And the rest of the Cyclones actually do come forward. And I guess it is enough because the charge lots aren't even endangering us around. The Immortals, I mean, they're going to get torn apart. Archon as well. Tons of SCVs died in the process. Tons of SCVs. But the Zealots, well, they might not have been of big enough numbers anyway, even if they were part of the main army. Might have been more useful guarding the main army. Maybe. You know, the charge lots swarm in on the army that's very marine light. The Cyclones kind of waste their shots on the Zealots, so the Immortals can actually queue them up and focus fire. The Zealots dissipates maybe at the trade of the Cyclones, maybe not. And the Stalkers can come in a higher number as you reinforce. I don't know, I feel like it would have gone better, but 23 SCVs did go down, so Nightmare can hope that the economic damage was enough. He's going to lose another Stalker before being able to recall out. And he just lost so much of his robo production. It was 3 Immortals killed, 2 Archons as well. Was constantly losing those Phoenix. And while he has a 4th base, his work count's not all that much higher. And he's working off of a fairly gas-light economy, so it's somewhat excusable, you know. But it now is getting kind of gas-intensive with High Templars. Storm coming in. GuMiHo's got the upgrade advantage, as Nightmare's +1 is still about 20 seconds off. Wouldn't mind dropping to the natural that I almost missed. Cleverly placed one, but Nightmare's on top of it. And Cyclone's coming in. Blink is done, so that's not going to last very long, and probably not worth it, but still little bits of damage, little bits of distraction as GuMiHo confidently places a 4th base on location, continues with his own 2-1 upgrades, and positions his army very aggressively, something that this Observer is just missing. This Zealot is going to see the tail end of the army. That is awfully suspicious. He should know that it's now about to hit his natural, but is he too late to responding? He was all the way over to the right side, man, so I would say yes. Wouldn't mind to get to plants. Cyclones actually leading the charge here probably isn't a terrible idea. And the Zealots just don't even get close to attacking the bio before so many of them die. Another one of mine ready to go too. Oh, but Storm is too! Oh goodness, that was a good Storm. So many Marines in the red. Now the Stalkers jump on forward as they go do one-shot these weakened Marines. And with a couple of Immortals in tow, the Marauders really don't want to stand and fight. They want to go back to some more units here, please and thank you. Forced to just temporarily as the Medevacs get shot down. It is what it is. GuMiHo entirely retreating at that point. Nice handling of the situation from Nightmare. Thank goodness for that Storm timing. But now we got EMPs. The Archon now defunct. The Immortals without their shields. The Storms, well, are still here, but maybe not in the future. That was another juicy one. Zealots hitting at the same time as well. GuMiHo, fortunately, not going to get too distracted by that. He actually scans, checking out for an Observer that's tracking his army. Nothing is, so he's not too worried about being found out. We got Warp Prism once again picking up Zealots, heading towards that main base that has 0 defense. Again, still no missile turret, still no Widow Mine. And come back to usually at 4 bases is around the time a Terran player will build at least 1 missile turret. But GuMiHo, I think he's just forgotten about it. He is banking 800 minerals after all, so he could certainly afford it. But he is focused elsewhere, so this is going to be a big Zealot warp in round number 2. GuMiHo's army is entirely out of position. Once again, just having to use his reinforcement to deal with this. A couple of Widow Mines. Maybe if they time out perfectly. Main engagement, kind of threatening to happen, but I don't think anyone truly wants to take it right now. Nightmare still very dependent on his High Templars. Those EMPs very scary to be running into, and better upgrades for the Terran. 2-1 to just the 1. The Zealots are really the best thing about this, so why take the engagement if the Zealots are still not being responded to? I think that's what Nightmare's thinking as well. 3rd CC has to lift. 17 SCVs have gone down. Now supply blocks for GuMiHo as well. Remember that his 4th base is an orbital. So yes, that gives him an extra mule, but it also gives him an extra place that's not safe. And if Nightmare could just send a couple of Zealots, well, or his army apparently, he'd take care of that as well. You gotta be careful though as Nightmare. This is a lot of his army that's being traded out for economy and not obviously for the army. GuMiHo has rallied together everything that he possibly can. Now responding quick enough to save his 4th base. Still has the EMPs, although not that many of them. and still has the superior army supply and upgrades. There's no storms in sight, actually. And EMPs are no, and this army is going to get demolished. Nightmare losing the majority of his army. Where the hell is the rest of it? One Colossus has popped, second one about to pop out as well. Nightmare might still be okay on the defense, but I think that was, again, a lot of army for economy. And the problem with that is obviously losing your main army, shall we call it, right? It was a very small one, but it was his main army because it's not properly protected. And how long does it take you to do that SCV damage? That's another problem. If it takes a long time to do that, and they get back to planting 4 bases down and producing 4 SCVs at a time, in the blink of an eye, it doesn't feel like it did any economic damage at all. And the mules being dropped, obviously, as well. No threat to the production, the usage of the energy, because there's no DTs. Although scan's still useful. For instance, scanning ahead and seeing High Templars are on the way, and combined with 3 Colossus, that is a fairly good Protoss army, but it's now a... how many upgrade lead? It's 3-2 versus 1 attack. I mean, this is... or 2 attack, my bad. So it's a 3 upgrade lead for GuMiHo. Nightmare has to be very, very careful. Zealot's entering to the 3rd CC once again. GuMiHo is not going to get peaceful mining anytime soon. But he's got 2 attacks possibly set up. One on the right side, threatening the 4th Nexus. And then the other army that was just tracked gives a very daunting scan into the natural. Sees something it doesn't like, though, and won't go for it. Whenever you see a scan against, a Terran player, they're about to attack you, right? +3 armor will finish before Nightmare's +3 attack. Shall add further worries to the direct engagement. GuMiHo, kind of flustered from all these run-bys, forced to drop so many supply depots. Holy shit. And he's actually been scanning pretty consistently. That's at least 5 double supply depots that he's dropped. Woof. And anyway, better to do it, get on supply block, and get back into the action than waste time trying to get your thoughts and buildings in order. Especially in a game like this, GuMiHo still has the advantage, but if he doesn't use it right now in such bold moves that could drop into the main base, he might lose his advantage. And this bold move in the main is working out. Slow warprint, unfortunately, from Nightmare, as the Zealots could have come in a little bit faster, might have stopped the Templar Archives from actually dying. Main army still looking potentially for an engagement. Only 1 Colossus guarding. Both Disruptors are scary, but none of their focus fired. And I'm worried that'll happen if Nightmare isn't paying attention. Nightmare does finally clear up the main base. Clear up the drop entirely, so the 4th is also protected. From the drop, anyway. But now it's going to be under fire from the main army. GuMiHo still making sure to have 2 armies at once. Now off to the left, far left. No 5th base in sight for our Terran. Oh, maybe spoke too soon. Now building it on location. No more Archons, no more High Templar. Could be a problem. Oh, wait, no, he built it so fast. Wow. I missed it. Wow, good on him. Good on him. Yeah, he built that so fast. But it's also a question of, do you want that many? Because the EMPs are so effective against it. But it really is EMP light yet again. GuMiHo. Now maxed out. Now rolling in the dough. Could certainly build whatever the heck he wants. But only after he actually engages. Nightmare supply block thanks to this pylon going down. And GuMiHo's 5th apparently is all good. As far as being placed on location. Nightmare really wants to be up a base as a Protoss player, so the fact that his 5th is only just now coming down and possibly going to be cancelled is not a good sign for him. GuMiHo has retained his lead, and barring a very, very unfortunate engagement with the Disruptors, should be able to even follow up his lead with the Liberators on the front line, and that's the real killing blow. Disruptors don't help against Liberators. That's 4 Disruptors there. That's pretty freaking scary. Oh my god, that's so freaking scary. Pretty good split, though. Focus fire and splits. Move away from the 3rd shots, and we still got 2 more there. You gotta be counting the shots, But without the Disruptors, Nightmare's army is so freaking flimsy. In general, that's the way things go, but especially when there's a 3 upgrade lead for the Terran player who jumps on top of both armies as I'm speaking and takes a tremendous fight. This was so freaking good for GuMiHo. Oh, he was waiting for a moment like that. 100 supply difference when the dust clears. And Nightmare not able to hold his own against the might of a maxed out 3-3 Terran force is going to be on his last life in the GSL. In the top left of Oceanborn, it is GuMiHo, now up 1. On the bottom right, it is Nightmare. Nightmare was in a very scary situation. You know, he did a lot of economic damage, but GuMiHo's 4th being an orbital does help make up for that. It just usually what a 4th orbital does is be such a vulnerable point that not only does it contribute to more SCV kills, it also contributes to the Terran player getting really frazzled. Yeah, really frazzled. So they end up losing track of the units, they end up F2ing, so they're not guarding whatever they wanted to guard anymore, they don't get on the other side of the map, so the Protoss player has plenty of time to do whatever the heck they want. And then it just continues getting attacked by run-bys, and it just, I don't know. I think a 4th being an orbital is extremely dangerous. But that was kind of one of those games where it really proved its potential. The economic damage done by the Zealots was considerable, but it didn't persist. It didn't happen over and over and over and over again. So GuMiHo was able to calm things down a little bit, to help with some supply depot drops, and collect his army that was far superior to his opponent, and get that engagement. Disruptors were the only thing that Nightmare had that could really deal with the bio army. And they did not get the shots off, did they? How did that game start? Oh yeah, with the Cyclone opener. I still found that one weird. I mean, it worked out, but I still found it really weird. So many Cyclones, so little aggression. I don't know. A Nightmare looked like he wanted to try and almost transfer over into, you know, it's what he did, I guess, is transfer kind of from a Phoenix-based situation, literally only 3 were ever produced. I think it's wise when someone goes 8 Cyclone and not produce any more Phoenix, but then go into a lot of charge lots. But then his attack didn't really team up together. So like I had hypothesized in the last game, we'll do it again. Would it have been better to just go for a direct attack? I think we know that it actually would have been, because GuMiHo's Cyclones were ever so slightly out of position. If Nightmare had actually just warped in with his army, the Zealots would have jumped on top of the bio kind of prior to the Cyclones getting there, and then probably would have been okay for Nightmare, but didn't happen. GuMiHo scouted it out, brought Cyclones back, and Nightmare's decision to go for the SEV kills did not end up rewarding him as much as he was hoping for. But he is not going to be discouraged from the Stargate opener. He's going to go forward again. Presumably in a Phoenix again, too. Starport on the way for GuMiHo as he goes for the very typical 1-rack expand 1-1-1. Or was it factory expand? Adept! Oh! Friendly fire! Nightmare purposefully microing at the last second to make sure at least a Marine died for him. But the Adept is not going to get any more scouting. The Sister might. Second Adept's going to see the second one of mine and actually kill the first one. Not too bad for an Adept. Oh, no. Okay. I was worried the Adept is going to still get targeted by the wood of mine. She's good. So is the SCV. One shot away from death against literally anything. Literally. But still alive and kicking. GuMiHo still wants to go into triple Woodamine at the very least. We got a 4th Woodamine on the way. Nightmare has Phoenix, obviously, so ideally we'll be able to just catch this medevac. GuMiHo never got a scout off in this game, so he has no idea about his opponent's composition. Unfortunately, well, that sounds like a really bad thing about a drop heading into the Phoenix. We know that this is just so entirely based off of where the medevac decides to drop. This could actually still work wonders for GuMiHo. Such is Protoss' lot in life. Cyclone and Viking on the way, as I guess GuMiHo is maybe predicting actually that it is Stargate. This is why you would build these 2 units. Otherwise, if you thought it was Colossus or Blink, you would get tanks. Woodamine's in some danger.
Ready to blunder.
Okay. Alright, this is still kind of scary for the Phoenix, though. Because 2 Woodamines do kill all these Phoenix. If all the Phoenix bunch. Now GuMiHo even protects him a little bit. So it does kind of feel like he actually still kind of predicted that it was Phoenix. Cyclone, Viking actually can even do a little bit of a push, especially if you continue building both of those units. He is still building Vikings, but now adding a tank. I still thinking? He's gonna go for a push. Widowmine drops, I think, just trying to confuse and confuzzle the Phoenix. One thing that Nightmare is, again, being forced to do is not do a whole lot of actual scouting. Now, you kind of know what the build is, I guess. You figure that there's going to be more barracks added, but this would tell him a faster 3rd CC versus faster barracks, and also the reason the barracks aren't down is also because there's been some dedication to the straight-up 1-1-1. And the Phoenix just, they can't go and scout that because they got to be wary of the Widowmine drop, so... this army gets on the front lines. Viking actually decides landing is a better choice. Widowmine's involved in the direct fights. Very annoying for Nightmare to try and tackle. He's tackling them as well as he possibly can, but it is just so complicated. And especially with the micro going down here. Nice save on the Cyclone. Now a tank is arriving, and that's the really bad news. The Stalkers do not want to fight a tank. You want those Phoenix to pick that up and get that out of the equation, but it's going to get the Nexus before anything is even done by Nightmare. And that already is a success. GuMiHo with a canceled Nexus, and just to further delay on that Nexus, Stalkers accidentally run into the tank when they're already weakened as well. And things are looking quite poor for Nightmare as he decides to take the other base instead. But he still has trouble actually handling this engagement, honestly. Still has some trouble because he did go back into a Nexus, because he's a little supply blocked, because his Colossus still isn't out. Really very good timing there from GuMiHo, who decides to once again go into Reactored Cyclones as the follow-up. I just have so many doubts about this. Committal to Cyclones, anyway. 4 Cyclones. Obviously to help out against the Phoenix once again, but a lot of other Terrans would have gone for 2 or 3, or I guess maybe if they're pushing, you know, whatever they want to do, then they would be focusing almost entirely on getting as many Marines out as possible. That would absolutely be a reactor for a barracks, but nope, it's going to be for Cyclones, and that actually is probably the best thing possible as Nightmare tries to make a counterattack happen, hoping to find a limited number of Marines and not much else. He instead runs into Cyclones that have already taken down so much of the army that the Cyclones now are going to tackle the Colossus. This had nothing protecting it. Oh, I feel like Nightmare just played into GuMiHo's hands, though. I refuse to believe the Cyclones are good. No, I mean, they are showing the times at which they are strongest, these very small army skirmishes, the high quality of the Protoss army, but low quantity. And then all the lock-ons go down on it. The interference matrix being done is also just a kick in the nuts. Colossus cannot help out. And this 3rd Nexus is going to be killed, and that just might be it. I believe in Nightmare being able to recover from the first lost Nexus, but not a second one that was legitimately killed as well. I don't know. GuMiHo still has enough firepower here that he could, you know, trade. It's not a freebie right now from Nightmare. Not a freebie at all. 1 Stalker at the very least went down. Phoenix are going to go down too, actually. The Cyclone got a lock on him, might have, but no, not anymore. So, I mean, it's definitely a better engagement for the Protoss, but after losing the Nexus, so that's still ultimately not good. The counterattack is a bit fearsome. GuMiHo taking it seriously. Might want to repair that tank as well. But Nightmare doesn't actually know that he has any possibility of counterattacking. He's figuring that the army is going to be there, the tank's going to be there, and in this case, GuMiHo took it so seriously that we even have stacked defense there. So that was, without the bunker and missile turrets, without any Widow mines as well, I mean, there's a maybe. Maybe Nightmare could have tried to counter. But keep in mind, no Warp Prism either. No charge. That would have been done at that point. Yeah. Not going to have an opportunity, so he is once again licking his wounds, replacing a Nexus back to its OG starting point in the triangle position, trying to get to something that can help him out in a poor game. So that is the Disruptor. You know, Dark Triangle, Disruptor, either one. This is a Cyclone drop. Blink is not done. Phoenix are mostly dead. This Phoenix is going to die, so... Yep, Phoenix are all dead. And GuMiHo is not stopping, in fact. He is using this to see where the army is, getting it a little out of place, and is making sure no 4th base is coming down cheeky cheek. No 4th indeed. And clear up that pylon, and they're now going to have a concave, so that Nightmare has to be very careful about moving down to face this army. That is a good number of Marauders. Tank is not going to be involved, so that's a bit of a bummer. Maybe you don't want to take this fight now, as the units are very clumped up. One of mine gets some damage done, but that turned a little awkward. GuMiHo is still finding some probe damage at the very least. I mean, it's, you know, encouraging for the Protoss to have these things happen. One after another, you know, take a decent fight up here, and then take a pretty good fight down there. And then get an expansion up. But still a 40 supply difference. 20 of which are in workers. Now GuMiHo is on 4 bases, comfortably mining, and now is going to dedicate to a planetary too. Not going to risk the orbital this time. And upgrades, as last game. Similar to this one. Actually, even worse in this game. Upgrades are an issue. Big Zealot run by is ready to go. It could be so perfectly timed that it really does trip GuMiHo up, but it's going to need to do a lot of damage. GuMiHo actually goes for the push. GuMiHo not going to, sees the attack incoming and runs back, so that's not going to do much damage at all. One Phoenix gets built again, just to help out against these medevacs that were tucking themselves into the corner. But the Zealots end up being a pretty colossal waste of life, actually. That was like 700 resources to kill 3 SUVs. Phoenix died as well. No Phoenix for you. And Nightmare is, once again, very, very discouraged, probably. GuMiHo's army continues to get better and better. More upgrades. More bio. Now Liberator's also a threat. The Observer sees the incoming force, but what can Nightmare even do about it as his army gets scanned? He can't even try and place his disruptors in surprising positions, which was my last possible hope. We're also still building tanks, so GuMiHo's looking for that to deal with the disruptors and the Colossus. He's not even bothering to build Vikings. He could. He could add 6 Vikings, and that would still probably be helpful, but the tanks kind of cover against both to a certain degree. Nightmare's on 4 bases. He's only down 40 supply now. It's starting to look a little bit better, but the upgrades, man, the upgrades. These Zealots, they're nothing. They are actually nothing. They didn't do anything there. As Nightmare tries to go for a run by, GuMiHo had the same idea with a superior force as well. +2 attack, also going to finish momentarily. Although this engagement already went the way of the Terran. And 2-2 will be done before Nightmare gets even close to finishing his +1 attack. Ay, ay, ay. Colossus respond here, leaving only the Disruptors to tackle this army up to the north. And oh my goodness, GuMiHo wasn't paying attention. Very good hits, right? Very good hits. The tanks weren't covering. And now it's only 1 shot remaining, and GuMiHo still has a superior army with tanks there. Nightmare didn't realize it, as Nightmare was paying attention to further reinforcements off to the 4th base. Unfortunately, the Colossus might not be enough. The shield battery might just be able to save the day. And GuMiHo is going to evacuate, but GuMiHo's got 5 bases now. He's going to have Caduceus Reactor, +3 attack, started up ASAP. And even though he has not been able to kill Nightmare, he is still doing damage, further denying a 5th base. And getting better and better. Very, very similar to last game. I expect him to find one moment in which Nightmare is a little too spread thin, and then he's going to win at the superior Terran forces. So many extra orbitals going to be coming down for GuMiHo as he adds on those pesky Liberators. Another scan perfectly positioned, so Nightmare cannot get the jump with the Disruptors, which are going to become less and less of a problem as the Liberators pop out. Nightmare gonna try and jump up to Stargate. Even though he's severely limited on resources, he knows the next step in this process is going to be Liberators appearing and knocking on his door. He's trying to get ahead of that, and it's not like Tempest or Carriers are gonna be completely useless against anything else that can happen. I was saying in the previous PvT that, like, yeah, sometimes 3 Carriers really don't add very much. The Marines just gun them all down, and the Interceptors anyway. But sometimes a Terran player can overbuild Marauders. Suddenly the Marine count's not nearly high enough, especially if a couple Colossus or Storms happen or whatever it is. And so, you know, Carriers can convolute the engagement, I suppose. It's just, I don't know, man. Now a supply block is hurting Nightmare. That scan did not reveal the intentions of a Stargate, so that's something that Nightmare's got in his pocket. He could actually build the damn things. Void Ray it is. Just something to help out right now, as the Liberators are now denying 2 bases of mining. Our Nightmare is already so far down in the income. can't even deal with this very smoothly. Finally, Disruptor's going to pop off, but only because GuMiHo was paying attention elsewhere, realizing that the middle of the road was actually open. Nightmare had defenses to the extremes of his bases, but not just right in the middle right there. Ain't that the worst of it? Big drop into the main base now can also tackle the Stargates. So much for that transition. And the Liberator could actually even help out a little bit with the engagements. At the end of the day, GuMiHo could sack this army and still be able to recover before Nightmare went for a big old counterattack, and that's exactly what GuMiHo's thinking as well, as he does realize he has to actually sack this army. Just take what he can get and then rebuild elsewhere. And GuMiHo is still up 40 supply, even after a pretty big loss of life in the main. They mostly went after the Stargates. Oh, tanks are still in position. Whew. GuMiHo close to having that +2 ship weapons for the Liberators too. He's got a mech army sieging up Nightmare's natural. Because that's what it is. One Marauder mixed in. Nightmare choosing to try and go for the counterattack, hoping that GuMiHo has spent too many army units in engaging his bases. GuMiHo still has a 20 army supply lead, still has Liberators popping out, and Liberators at the very, very end of the day could just siege up in the natural to at least save the production line. And meanwhile, the planetaries will hold on to at least some economy elsewhere. So I'm basically saying there's really not a hope for Nightmare. It's the best possible thing he could do at this point. He does kill an entire base worth of SCVs and the orbital as well, but yeah, there's not much he can do. Sitting on top of the Colossus, taking them out of the equation, and that is a 3-3 Terran force versus just the +2 Link Stalkers. That ain't working. GuMiHo gonna do even better than his first match against Nightmare and get the 2-0. He will be moving on to the round of 8 of GSL. And the Protosses will be still only at 2. I think Hero has yet to play, maybe, but yeah, so for only stats and Classic. That means we got Terran, GuMiHo, and Byun to the round of 8s. And I forgot everyone else has already made it through, so you can just check Wikipedia. Group D will be played out next week, so I will be casting that as soon as it is played. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you later.